Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the southern United States. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. If you would like to join the program, you can give us a call. We'll go ahead and open the lines right here at the start of the show. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. If you're listening to us as a podcast, folks, go ahead and give us 5 stars. Give us a 5-star rating. Amazingly, you know, folks know that we are based out of Alabama. We are, I believe, the highest rated and most rated news and politics podcast in Alabama that's based out of Alabama on Spotify. And we are one of the top rated on Apple Podcasts. We have amazingly, historically, always been ahead of the conservative podcasts on Apple Podcasts and like even, you know, close to even with them on Spotify. But I just checked right now, and one of 1819 News, one of their podcasts, which is like 1819 News, for those of you who don't know, is like, you know, big millionaire, billionaire funded Koch brothers kind of thing, big, you know, like has dozens of people working for them. And we're just a few people here doing this part-time. But they have like 2 or 3 more ratings than we do on Apple Podcasts, where we have always been like way ahead of them. So folks, we gotta get those numbers up. If you listen to us, or even if you don't listen to us on Apple Podcasts, head over there, give us 5 stars, all that good stuff. Same on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, if you're listening to us that way, or if you're not listening to us that way. Go find us on a podcast platform, give us 5 stars. They say it really helps. You know, I don't know. I don't know that we're big enough to really tell that much, but just as a point of pride, I always love being able to say that we are one of the highest rated news and politics podcasts from the state of Alabama. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the YouTube chat. Already in the first, several dozen seconds here on the program, we've got almost 30 people watching us, but only a few people have liked the stream, so go ahead and like the stream if you haven't yet. Quirky Geek Girl in the chat says, good morning. Did you see Jane Fonda's pro-union speech when she accepted her Lifetime Achievement Award from SAG? I didn't watch it, but I did see some commentary about it. Jane Fonda always has, always been pro-union is my understanding, so not super surprising, but always great to hear pro-union sentiment reiterated. Justin Coble in the chat asks, Postal talk going down today? We will be talking some Postal stuff. All of that is going to be in the second half of the show. So starting at 11, but we've got a voicemail about the post office that we'll be playing, as well as there was an interview that Brian Renfro did with some letter carriers, like 2.5 hours. So we've pulled a couple of clips from that, and we'll encourage folks to listen to that whole thing. But yeah, great show lined up for you today. We're going to jump right into it. We've got this voicemail here from a listener in Birmingham about some events that are happening in the area. Let's go ahead and play this clip.
Hey, Adam. Hey, Jacob. This is Daniel from Birmingham. I'm a member of the Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center, and I wanted to just shout out 2 events that are coming up in North Alabama that your listeners might be interested in. The first one is a moderated panel on community and the power of social connection. We have Zach Hayden, who started a mutual aid, pay what you can automotive clinic called the Automotive Free Clinic. We have a man named Jarrell Jones, who started a community nonprofit in West Birmingham, which dropped crime significantly. And we have a good friend of ours who did a study on the effects of social isolation and loneliness and friendships across class in America in 2024. And they're going to be talking at the cabin. I can give Adam and Jacob the information about how to register for the event, but this is on March 13th in Garnersville. And then on April 5th and 6th, we have a kind of version of that on steroids where we have workers and scholars, even your very own Adam Keller coming to the cabin for our Brick and Barn conference supported by the Alabama Humanities Alliance. And so they can send you the information on how to sign up for that as well. We'd love to loop everyone into what we're doing. We do cooperative education. We help people start worker cooperatives and just generally try to provide workers with an outlet to organize themselves and build power. So we hope that you'll join us for those events on March 13th and then on April 5th and 6th. Thanks so much.
So there you go. Those sound like really cool events. You know, the isolation has been a huge problem. And I actually just saw this graph last week that showed that the proportion of 12th graders that hang out with friends 2 times a week or more is down almost at historic lows. Is like not much higher than it was during the pandemic, but it had been trending downward up to the pandemic for the last decade. And supposedly like 20 years ago, the amount of 12th graders, seniors in high school who hung out with friends 2 times a week or more was like 85%. And now it's only like 55 or 60%. Which, like, and I don't know if it's just because I'm part of the decline, right? Because I was a senior in 2015. So, you know, but like hanging out with friends twice a week sounds like a lot. Like, I don't, you know, I mean, obviously, especially now as an adult, like significantly fewer adults do that. But even in high school, like, I wonder if that study was counting, like, counting like practices for sports and stuff as hanging out with friends. I don't know, but I definitely did not hang out with friends twice every week just as a social kind of thing. But, you know, anyway, so the social isolation has been really, really bad. So they're gonna be having an event talking about that. And we put the registration link in the chat and in the description of the program, and then Adam is going to be talking to them later about labor organizing and stuff like that later on in the month. We've also got the registration for that in the chat as well. Not a paid promotion. They're just a listener doing some stuff and wanted to let our audience know they might be interested, and I think the audience might be interested too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. A big fan of Daniel and all they're doing in Sand Mountain with the Cooperative Education Center. So look them up. They're doing good work. I agree about the isolation issue. That came up in our conversation with Eric Blanc last week when we were talking about labor organizing and how, you know, compared to earlier generations, we have to do a lot more work on the front end when it comes to building relationships, building trust, building belonging. I mean, just convincing people to have conversations with people that they don't really know very well, just getting out of your comfort zone. Those are all things that we have to work on because ultimately it's required to make positive social change, whether it's in the workplace, the community, or in politics. So, appreciate that. And thanks for the voicemail. And just want to remind folks that if you want to do the same thing, if you have some cool stuff you're working on, particularly here in our listening area, definitely give us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. You can do that anytime throughout the week. We'd love to hear reports from across the state and across the South. What's going on in your union? What's going on in your community? What's going on, politically? Love to hear those reports.
Absolutely. We do have one more voicemail from another caller about a bill that is before the state legislature. Let's listen to that.
Hello, Adam and Jacob and Valley Labor Report listeners. This is Marissa from Huntsville's At the Root Collective in the North Alabama Democratic Socialists of America. Wanted to call and leave a message and hope that your listeners are paying attention to the many bad bills that are coming through the Alabama State Legislature. Right now, I want to kind of draw their attention to House Bill 4, which is a bill that will jail librarians and also creates a ban on transgender people in the library and also in public schools. This is a huge infringement on worker rights of doing their jobs. And basically what is happening within this bill is that they are being asked to, shelve materials that people are not going to be offended by changing the definition within the Alabama Obscenity Code for sexual conduct to include some pretty vague wording around gender-oriented conduct. So it's good for your listeners to know that they should be writing to their House of Representatives and if they want to take a look, we've got a draft message. We've worked in collaboration with the Alabama Transgender Rights Coalition, and you can go to their website. That's altrac, ALTRAC.works. And under there, you'll find a link to HB4 that'll take you directly to call your legislator to let them know that you do not support this bill. The bill will allow just anybody to come after a librarian for shelving a book that they believe is considered sexual conduct. What we know out of other states, such as Arkansas, where it was ruled, a similar bill was ruled unconstitutional, is that these laws are very vague. They're a violation of First Amendment rights and a violation of 14th Amendment rights as well. What we know for librarians who will be fearful of not just their jobs, but also having to potentially be criminally liable for doing their jobs, is that they will probably overcorrect. And that means that they're going to violate our First Amendment rights by not shelving material that they're afraid that might get them arrested. So I just wanted to call and let you all know and just tell your listeners to head over to altrac.works. That's ALTRAC .WORKS. And they can find there a whole list of actions. What I'm talking about today is around House Bill 4. Lots of information in there. If your listeners want to hold a letter writing party, there's information about that. And if you want to do just a little quick email to your representative, there's also a form letter in there that you can adjust and send on. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Solidarity, y'all.
All right. Appreciate the call. Again, if you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can do that at any time throughout the week. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857.
I was just going to add that I've heard a lot of talk about this House Bill 4, and I know that legislators have been receiving a lot of calls about it because, there's the issue of your just intellectual freedom, the ability to go to the library and, check out the books that you want to check out, but also the worker aspect in terms of librarians being held criminally liable. It's just bizarre. I'm pretty live and let live on these subjects. I think if you don't want a book in the library, don't check it out. I know that's a hot take, perhaps. I would also suggest that if you are a parent and you're concerned about what books are in the library, you should be with your child.
Right.
Just a thought, though.
Yeah. We do have a caller on the line, so we'll go ahead and take that call. The call is from a 760 area code. Caller from a 760 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello, Daniel, NALC, local 2525. Thank you for taking the call.
Daniel,
I just wanted to have a brief.
What's on your mind?
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for taking the call. And so what I just want to talk about today is, what's been happening over the last 50 years as far as skirting liability and putting it from the onus from the employer onto the worker. And so that's been a very important part of of why I'm getting involved in union work, is being able to bring worker power back. And so what might sound good legalistically or as a what's a connotation versus a denotation is a lot different. And so, let me give an example. In the 1970 strike, there was a law that came out of that, and it was the Postal Reform Act. And so the word shall is that the USPS shall, make the wages equivalent to the private industry, and that's just a loose, that's not the exact quote. But shall is not a must. And this is where it's really important that whenever you're looking at contract language, shall is not equal to must. And same thing as may or, words like that. And so I would implore just anybody just to educate themselves on those types of words. And just, you can go on Google and just look up, shall as a legal language or must legal language, and or just YouTube it and really educate yourself on those types of words, because it really makes a big difference. And for the bigger unions too, they've actually have done that too, where they've shifted the liability off of them. And so, we need to keep our unions accountable, the big ones especially, as well as the larger employers as well. And it's just a group think talk. And there is a shift in our country, and I'm very optimistic of the future. But we need to be involved. We're all in this together, and let's bring it to them and let's fight.
Appreciate the call, Daniel. Thank you so much. Just on what you mentioned at the beginning of the call, the kind of general shifting of liability from employer to worker is something that has been, a calling card of corporate America and, the international corporate elite for decades. Anytime there's a safety incident, the employer, the boss's immediate instinct is to go to both in order to, save their hide, is to blame the worker, is to ask, well, what did the worker not do? Rather than, well, did the worker receive the proper training? Was the worker properly rested? Was there enough workers on the job? Is this a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 person job that one person is doing? And so, this has been problematic for a very long time, and is happening in all sorts of industries. Including the, air traffic control, just for one that's been in the news recently. So yeah, appreciate that call, Daniel. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Also wanted to add, I appreciate the point about being very deliberate when you're looking at contract language. If you are serving on a bargaining team, you do have to really dissect that language. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to carefully consider how these words can be interpreted and how they can be misused, because it's one thing to get your contract, but it's another thing to enforce your contract and hold the company accountable to comply. So that's a good point as well.
Adam, one of the calls was about a bill that's down in Montgomery, and there are some other bills around kind of healthcare and like a Medicaid expansion light. You went down to Montgomery last week to talk to legislators about some of these different ideas that are floating around. So can you give us just a brief on kind of the Alpha Bill versus the Blue Cross Blue Shield initiative, and like what's going on and what does it all mean for folks in Alabama?
Sure, yeah. So I was really pleased and enjoyed my experience going to Montgomery this past week with the Cover Alabama Coalition. It's a coalition of well over 100 groups fighting for Medicaid expansion and for better health care for Alabamians, period. And so it was a good event. There was about 100 folks in attendance, and we all were there to talk to legislators, both primarily in the state Senate, but also in the state House, and talk to them about a couple of important issues when it comes to health care. First, the national context is obviously that Medicaid is facing some severe cuts, which is a threat to really all of us across the South, across Alabama, across the country. Particularly the most vulnerable folks, children, the disabled, elderly, who really do rely on Medicaid. But that said, there's still a lot of work to be done at the state level because we have a healthcare crisis in the state of Alabama. Hospitals, particularly in rural areas, are closing. We've had several close over the last decade, and many more, over a dozen more, are actually at risk of closure, like immediate risk of closure. So it's a really, that's troubling in itself. But we have about 200,000 folks who are caught in the healthcare coverage gap. They make too much money to qualify for Medicaid, as strict as it is in this state, but not enough to actually get private health care. And these are over half of the people in this healthcare coverage gap are working, right? These are folks who maybe cook your food, clean your offices, cut your hair, right? A lot of folks in the service industry and other industries where their pay is not good and benefits are lacking. And Alabama is one of 10 states across the country that did not expand Medicaid after the Affordable Care Act. And I should note that of those 40 states that expanded Medicaid, not a single one has gone backwards, right? Because what it would do for the state of Alabama is bring billions of federal dollars into our state. It would create tens of thousands of jobs. It would help save our hospitals. And more importantly, it would save people's lives, right? We have about 200,000 of our neighbors suffering needlessly without health care, and we could fix this with Medicaid expansion. There's, some pushback from lawmakers in Montgomery over the years arguing, well, how are we going to pay for it? And the truth is, study after study has demonstrated that it would actually pay for itself, particularly when you factor in the federal subsidies and what's on offer from the federal government via taxes that we have all already paid into, right? So Alabamians are paying federal taxes, and folks in Arkansas and North Carolina and Michigan and California, they're benefiting from this program, and we're not. So we were there to talk about that issue and talk about Medicaid expansion with lawmakers. And one of the other big issues going on right now is Senate Bill 84. It is a bill that is being pushed primarily by the Farmers Federation, Alpha Insurance, which is a very powerful special interest in this state. And according to, the American Cancer Society, Action Network, according to Cover Alabama and others who have looked at this bill, basically it would legalize unregulated, unreliable junk healthcare plans, not real health insurance. It's not regulated by the ACA. And therefore, they do not have to follow those rules when it comes to pre-existing conditions or, actually following through for you when you need help. So there is a big push to get this plan or this bill through SB 84. And there's been a lot of chatter in the media because Blue Cross Blue Shield is opposed to this plan. All right. And it's, we can draw our own conclusions on why. But it's been interesting to see these two very powerful, special interests in the state of Alabama, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Alpha Insurance, going head to head. And they've been battling in the op-ed pages. I saw an op-ed from Steve Flowers that was published in a lot of newspapers recently, where he was basically reiterating Alpha's talking points about how, this is supposed to help the farmers. I'm not sure how it helps the farmer if they get denied coverage, but that's another question. So Blue Cross and Alpha have been feuding publicly over this bill. And I guess the other thing that you did mention is Blue Cross Blue Shield had come out with a plan that was similar to Medicaid expansion, but basically it would do a similar thing in terms of expanding healthcare, but rather than those folks going on Medicaid, many of them would go on Blue Cross Blue Shield plans that would be subsidized with these dollars. So it's a private public hybrid plan, and they were trying to make traction on that in recent months. Haven't heard a whole lot about it. It's been pretty quiet. So, me personally, I think I'm going to continue beating the drum for Medicaid expansion, because I think it's the easy solution to help a whole lot of our neighbors while growing our economy from the bottom up, and we really can't afford not to do it. And the last thing I'll say on it was, we hear a lot about mental illness and mental health, and I talk to people in the community all the time, and they bring up mental health and how many folks are struggling with mental illnesses and substance use disorders, and how few options there are in this state for help. People don't have a lot of opportunities for help. And I did some quick Google math, just looking at basically how many folks have mental illnesses, how many folks in Alabama specifically, and then, how many folks of those don't have health care. And it's tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of people are out here with untreated mental illnesses because they don't have health care. They're caught in this coverage gap, right? So, whatever. Maternal and infant health is another area that has been really, really devastated by our lack of Medicaid expansion. We have pregnant mothers who are driving 50, 60 miles or more just to get the health care they need. Most of our listeners know that Alabama ranks at or near the bottom of maternal and infant health care statistics. Of course, this is a state that proclaims to be pro-family, pro-child, pro-baby. All the politicians, tell us that pretty regularly, especially every 4 years. It's interesting to see the conversations around health in the state legislature. I will say that I did not have a chance to speak to my senator personally because there was a long line of lobbyists waiting to see him, and so I couldn't get in. I definitely left a note, left my number, all that good stuff. But I do want to encourage folks, however you feel about these bills, or the one that we had the call about earlier, HB4, the library bill, whatever you think about any of these issues, do stay in contact with your legislators, because they are hearing from very special interests, very powerful, wealthy forces in the state, right? They hear from them all the time. It's important that they hear from their actual constituents. Are they always going to listen to you? No, right? Because we recognize who these folks are accountable to often, and who put them in office typically. And we recognize some of their ideologies. But it is really important to advocate for what's important to you and to your community and your interest and your family's interests. When you see legislation out there that you think is harmful, it's important to speak up, and vice versa. When you see legislation out there that can help people, speak up. Let your lawmakers know that it's important to you. It only takes a few minutes to make that phone call or to send that email. I really do encourage folks to do that. It's worth your time. And if you can build a relationship with your lawmaker, try to. But if nothing else, do stay in communication with them. Let them know what's important to you, because they're hearing from folks that are a lot more powerful and richer than we are. But ultimately, it's we working class folks who are the majority. We are the majority of their constituents. We are the majority of the taxpayers. And so it's important that they hear from us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that update. And you mentioned I kind of doubt that anything is going to be happening this session, just because of all the uncertainty in D.C. The House and the Senate in D.C. both passed dueling budget resolutions last week that are very, very concerning. This is just, it is just the first step. It's a budget resolution. There's not even provision for any cuts or expenditures basically at all. It says it sets a goal of, hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts and hundreds of billions of dollars in spending cuts, and then directs the different, committees to try to find those. But, the reality is that the on the scale of the spending cuts that they're talking about, you cannot cut that much without cutting into Medicaid. And so, it's going to be difficult to, it's going to be difficult to find all of those without hurting a lot of people. And that's what's going to happen. So we'll see what happens in D.C. and what happens in Montgomery. We're going to take a break here really quick, and we will be right back to give you Last Week in Southern Labor and to talk to Chris Doles, president of IFPTE Local 98 at the Corps of Engineers in New York, about how federal workers have been reacting to the attacks on them by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today, we talk to Chris Doles, president of IFPTE Local 98 at the Corps of Engineers in New York, about the attacks on federal workers. We also take a look at what workers and bosses were up to in the southern United States last week. Take your calls, respond to voicemails, and more. All that on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week, and we might respond on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We've also got a bunch of really cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. Our logo dad caps and our union-made matchbooks in particular. You can get those, like I said, tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that at tvlr.fm/contact.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries, Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, WGOW, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a couple diehard union brothers who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us on YouTube. About 70 people watching, but only 35 people have liked the stream. Go ahead and like the stream if you haven't. Also appreciate Mark and Jay Nosai for going back and forth in the chat about pretty in-the-weeds stuff about the letter carrier's contract. I hope that y'all are enjoying yourselves. Let's go ahead and jump right into last week in Southern labor. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from February 21st to the 28th. In new union campaigns, 36 workers at Reworld Waste in Tampa, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 108. 13 workers at Impanola in New Orleans, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 270. 95 workers at Dagcor Aluminum in Chavez, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 83 workers at the Southern Electric Corporation in Pembroke Pines, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 222. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 6 workers at K and Associates in New Orleans, Louisiana, demonstrated support for unionization with IUECWA, the CWA's industrial division. 220 workers at Genesis Logistics in Stafford, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 322, and 25 workers at the North Carolina Association of Educators in Raleigh, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with the National Staff Organization. In election results, for the first time in a long time, very, very bleak news. As far as I can tell, 0 workers won union campaigns anywhere across the South last week. 72 workers at Sherwin-Williams in Birmingham, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, IBB, but then withdrew the petition in the same week. 13 workers at King and George in Louisville, Kentucky, withdrew their petition for a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Steamfitters, UA, Local 184. 13 workers at McAllister Oil in Memphis, Tennessee, voted 3-9 against unionization with the Teamsters Local 667, and 21 workers at Greenlight Dispensary in Harrisonville, Missouri, voted 5-13 against unionization with the Teamsters Local 955. That one was very surprising because the dispensary elections have historically been very, very lopsidedly pro-union, so kind of surprised to see that lost. Wonder what happened there. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, rideshare drivers in Tennessee, organized with the Tennessee Drivers Union, are alleging that the Nashville Transit Authority has barred 34 drivers from servicing the airport after they participated in a peaceful demonstration protesting their low pay. An Alabama lunchroom worker was fired after accepting donations to feed students, allegedly because she lied about the collecting of donations, but there is, for the record, no allegation of any sort of theft or embezzlement from the employer or from people donating. A federal judge ruled that the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, does not have the authority to direct agencies to fire probationary workers since Congress gave that authority to the agencies themselves. The federal judge ordered OPM to rescind said directive and further ordered that the Department of Defense not go forward with plans to fire probationary employees that was scheduled to be executed yesterday. Additionally, the Office of Special Counsel, OSC, not to be confused with, Special Counsel Robert Mueller or whatever. This is a standing office within the executive department that is responsible for investigating illegal actions taken against federal workers. The Office of Special Counsel also found that 6 employees were fired illegally. This comes after the leader of the OSC was fired by Trump, but a court overturned his firing. The Merit Systems Protections Board, where a court has also overturned the Trump firing of the Merit Systems Protection Board MSPB chair, will enforce the decision. And now the attorneys for the plaintiffs are seeking to expand this temporary relief of having these employees reinstated for at least 45 days while the complaint concludes. The attorneys for the plaintiffs are seeking to expand this relief to all similarly situated probationary employees who have been fired. However, on the same day as the federal court ruling, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, began firing probationary employees en masse anyways, even though famous Alabama meteorologist James Spann, who is never political, came out strongly against such cuts at NOAA and the NWS. The cuts are expected to affect between 600 and 1,800 employees nationwide. In strikes and bargaining updates, members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW Local 1296, who manufacture large commercial heating and air units at Train Technologies in Clarksville, Tennessee, ratified a new 4-year collective bargaining agreement that includes wage increases, including 9.3% wage increases in year 1, increases paid time off, and increases protections against mandatory overtime and more, according to the union. Members of the IAMAW Local Lodge 44, who work for United Launch Alliance here in Decatur, Alabama, meanwhile, voted to authorize a strike by 100% as their negotiating committee heads into bargaining with the company. Video game workers at ZeniMax, including in Texas, who are unionized with ZeniMax Workers United CWA, protested last week and held an informational picket to demand progress in bargaining for a first contract with the Microsoft subsidiary. 100 pharmacies across the state of Alabama walked off the job last week to support a bill that would reform, quote, pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, which pharmacists say are harming the industry. Hundreds of drivers for 10 roads, including those in North Carolina, unionized with the Teamsters, are on strike against the company over their bad faith bargaining. 10 roads is one of the largest contractors for the U.S. Postal Service. The National Association of Letter Carriers, NALC, is now calling on local branches to organize rallies to oppose the dismantling of the Postal Service on Sunday, March 23rd. The members of the International Longsaw Association, ILA, ratified the agreement, which increased wages by 62% by a whopping 99% margin. Really excited for those folks. Rail machinists in the International Association of Machinists District Lodge 19 ratified a new contract by 67%. The new contract includes wage increases, increased overtime, vacation time, and more, according to the union. In political and legislative updates, Florida's legislative session begins next week, and Republicans have filed several bills to make the lives of workers worse. Specifically, they have filed bills to make unionization more difficult for public sector workers, make it easier to decertify public sector unions, further weaken child labor laws, and allow apprentices and interns to be paid less than the state minimum wage. Several of these are ALEC bills, and the Center for Media and Democracy has a good explainer on their agenda for state legislatures in 2025. It's bad, is the TLDR. The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy has an explainer out on HB 398 in the Kentucky House, which would significantly cut back on worker safety protections in the state. The U.S. House and Senate passed budget resolutions that lay the groundwork for tax cuts for wealthy folks and spending cuts for poor folks. Multiple unions have issued statements opposing the resolutions. In Alabama's Rocket City, the return to office order is already having an effect on traffic, with 15% more traffic around the arsenal. This is also requiring the arsenal to hire more gate guards. As a reminder, all the evidence points to telework being as or more productive than in-office work for those eligible. More DOGE effects in Alabama include the closure of 3 rural Social Security offices, the closure of Mobile's EEOC office, the firing of probationary employees at the Social Security Administration in Birmingham, and more. The Alabama Reflector interviewed a Department of Education employee in Birmingham who was part of the probationary firings. DOGE cuts are even extending to prison guards, where the U.S. Bureau of Prisons last week told employees to expect pay cuts of anywhere between 10 and 25%. Wow. Bernie Sanders introduced a bill that would fully fund Social Security for 75 years while raising cost of living adjustments and increasing benefits across the board. The increased expenditures would have been funded by simply removing the cap on Social Security taxes, making millionaires and billionaires pay the same Social Security taxes you do. But the bill was blocked from even receiving a vote by Republicans. Trump nominated Wayne Palmer to lead the Mine Safety and Health Administration. Palmer has made frequent use of the revolving door, moving from regulatory jobs in the government to positions for employer organizations and back again. Business groups applauded the decision, of course, including groups that have explicitly lobbied in favor of eliminating a new rule limiting the amount of allowable silica dust in coal mines. As a reminder, silica dust in coal mines has led to a significant increase in the rate of black lung among miners, and if the rule is rolled back before it's ever able to be properly implemented, this will no doubt increase further. In internal union updates, after huge drops in the stock price of Tesla of like 30% or more, the American Federation of Teachers has sent letters to managers of their pension funds urging them to immediately review their holdings of Tesla stock and explore options to protect AFT pensioners. That's it for our labor updates. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. We have on the line now Chris Doles. Chris Doles is the president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE, Local 98 in New York, representing Corps of Engineers employees. He is also, of course, himself a Corps of Engineer employee, although he is not representing the agency, and he is only speaking in his personal capacity. He is also steering committee for the Federal Unionists Network. Chris, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Jake. It's always great to be with you.
Really appreciate you making the time. You have been incredibly busy. You have been making the rounds, as our thumbnail on today's show indicates. You've been on MSNBC, you've been on CNN, you went on Hassan Piker's stream. I don't know if you were on Democracy Now! I mean, you've really been making the rounds in the last week, generally talking about the attack on federal workers, but also promoting the Federal Unionist Network's first nationwide day of action. So I guess for our audience, can you give us just a general overview of the message that you have been taking to the country over the last week?
Your listeners know the attack on the federal workforce is not really about the federal workforce. It's not really about government efficiency. It's really about remaking the civil service, eliminating large parts of the civil service in the image of the billionaire class, right? They want to see all the worst aspects of small government, so deregulation, privatization. They want to eliminate all kinds of safety net programs that kind of raise the bar, whether it's minimum wage policies or it's the types of regulations that keep our communities safe to live in and the air safe to breathe and the food safe to eat. They want to eliminate all kinds of the safety net protections that the civil service provides, while at the same time implementing the worst aspects of big government, its repressive apparatus, its capacity to deport the weakest people in our society, those who have the fewest rights, undocumented immigrants. They're really combining the worst aspects of large government and small government. That's their vision. That's what this is really about. It's not about government efficiency. If they wanted the government to be more efficient, if they wanted Congress's mandate to be implemented more efficiently, because God knows, I think we should be more efficient at regulating businesses like Elon Musk's. We should be more effective at stopping predatory lenders the way that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was set up to do. The EPA should be more resourced to protect the quality of our air and water and our environment. But that's not what this is about. This is an attack on government services to immiserate the population and make it easier to be a billionaire in this country and harder to be a worker, because that makes us more exploitable. So it's actually a very simple project that they have afoot, and it's our job to pivot the narrative that I think the media has been attracted to, which is government workers as just victims of this. Sure, of course, government workers are facing, mass terminations and an erosion of our labor protections, and the programs and agencies that we've committed ourselves to are being, shuttered in some cases, significantly curtailed. But the real narrative isn't about like what might happen to me and my family. Appreciate the solidarity when that comes, but it's really about the broader services. And that's why the National Day of Action was themed around SOS, Save Our Services. It's a beacon call. It's a distress signal from the federal workforce to the broader public that this is not just our fight, but this is about defending the entire public sphere from the vision of a handful of billionaires who are trying to remake our government and our society in their own image. And so that's the call that we're putting out from the Federal Unionist Network.
Yeah, it is really frustrating to see so many people kind of buying this line that the government, buying the line that is being sold to them by literally the richest person in the world, as if he is going in for your benefit and cutting up the government and doing, and trying to destroy it. And it's not for him at all. I mean, it really is kind of amazing that folks are buying this. And I was talking to somebody literally just last week, and so much of this information is repressed that we don't know about. And the fact that the reality is that, maybe there are problems, but the fix to the problem is a reinvigorated public service, is a public sector that has been unleashed. And specifically, when we talk about Social Security, the Social Security Administration is at its lowest level in 50 years in terms of staffing. And they always talk about, it's going to go bankrupt in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. I told somebody this the other week, and I've been in circles that this fact has been going around long enough that I thought that everybody knew this, but this person, twice my age, had never heard this. And that is the reality that if you that there is a cap on Social Security taxes, right? That you don't pay any Social Security taxes after like $160,000. So a multi-billionaire, somebody who's making tens, hundreds, billions of dollars a year, pays the same absolute value into Social Security that somebody who makes $160,000 does. If you remove that cap, you fully fund Social Security for 75 years while also being able to expand benefits across the board. They had never heard that. And so it's like clear when you understand, the reality of the situation is that, the problems with inefficiencies in the government come from allowing people like Elon Musk to hoard all this wealth and to get away with being unregulated and exploiting so many people in our economy. One of the interviews that you did on MSNBC was with a fired employee of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Can you lay out for us why, at so many of these agencies, Elon Musk has a specific interest in dismantling these agencies? What is his specific interest in dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau?
Yeah, I mean, most auto manufacturing companies do two things to make money. One is they build and sell vehicles, cars. But the other thing that they do is they sell financial products. They lend, right? You take out a loan to buy your car. That's often financed by the financial wing of that company. And Tesla.
Chris, you're kind of coming in and out. I'm not sure if there's something maybe over your microphone or if your internet is bad. But I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Okay, is this any better if I lean
better.
in?
Yeah, that's so much better. Yeah.
Okay. So all auto manufacturing companies have really two ways of making money, right? They sell cars, but they also sell financial products to lend people the money to buy those cars. And I think there's a famous quote from forget which leader of which Detroit auto manufacturer in the 70s or 80s, but like our job is not to make cars, our job is to make money. That might have been U.S. Steel, but it's the basic premise. These companies sell not only cars, but also they make money in their financial wing. Tesla has one as well, and it's part of the CFPB's charge, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to guard against predatory lenders, and that of course includes auto loans that are extended by companies like Elon Musk's. So there's a direct interest by Elon Musk to eliminate the regulatory role of the state through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So there's just very clearly a direct self-interest. It's so on the nose that it can actually be a little bit distorting, because I think it's easy to think that this is all just about Elon Musk protecting his own interests, and it certainly is that. But it's also about the broader interests of the billionaire class to deregulate and privatize and generally build a laissez-faire system that eliminates the protections for workers and provide that floor that government services often provide. You mentioned the Social Security, the cap on who gets taxed. I mean, there's a few things, including that, but also the child tax credit. There's a minimum wage legislation at the federal and state levels that if the official opposition to the Republican Party's new new leadership. If the Democratic Party were interested in turning this momentum against Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the takeover of American politics by this billionaire class, wrapped up in the Republican Party, then they would lead with some of the most basic, simple solutions to address the historic inequality that we have. Yes, tax the rich to fund Social Security fairly and progressively. Yes, reintroduce the child tax credit, which was massively popular, and raise the floor through minimum wage. There's probably others as well, but those are the three that come to mind as the basic things that should be championed. Every American should be hearing about them, but I fear that there's too many people in the Democratic Party who are caught flat-footed right now, but to lead the charge with an offensive program that can actually undermine the support that Trump and Musk seem to be operating off of. But I think it can change if the movement can raise those demands and force the leadership of the Democratic Party or whoever else doesn't want to get caught up in the political liabilities associated with Musk and Trump long term. I think that's the basic strategy that organized labor has to pursue, and any political leaders that get with us, then I think that they'll benefit. But any that don't, then they just need to get out of the way.
One of the bigger actions that has taken place in response to this across the country was the Federal Unionist Network's first nationwide day of action last week. I'm interested. I'm sure that your steering committee in the fund has had sort of debrief calls about this, and so I'm curious what is the fund's takeaway from this, and are there reactions from lawmakers or government officials that you were looking to see that you got or that you didn't get, and what's next?
Yeah, I think it was an overall success. It was the first time that the fund did anything like this. We've done webinars, you've helped MC those events. We've done public-facing events, but this was the first time in the streets, any type of call for solidarity from the broader labor movement and the broader public. And we had more than 35 different cities where fund actions took place. We partnered with different unions, including UAW and other higher ed unions, because of the confluence of interests that we have around some of these attacks on federally funded programs. We worked closely with the central labor councils in a lot of different places. It was the outpouring of solidarity was really incredible. I think looking ahead, we want to build off of that and continue to provide a place where federal workers see that it's their unity with each other, building a sectoral strategy. So the entire federal sector actually mobilizing as one to defend not just our interests as federal civil servants, but also by extension, the interests of the broader public in protecting all the services and funding streams that allow, Medicaid and Medicare to support home health aides and the healthcare of our elders, veterans healthcare, regulatory protection of the environment and labor law, like all the things that we do. Obviously, the broader public has an interest in. So we want to build on that message, right? That SOS, Save Our Services message that we put out through the Day of Action. And our next step, I'll outline quickly, is we're looking at the next few weeks, trying to build the capacity of our local members of the fund, people who are active in our network, to leverage their local unions. Because ultimately, what's the UN fund? It's the unionists. We're people who see our unions as the vehicle that's ultimately going to be capable of building this as a movement that can contend with Musk. So we want to get our union locals, and by extension our national unions as well, to prioritize mobilizing rapid response as the terminations are going to continue, as they unfold, as dozens of people get terminated, whether it's because they're probationary or because of reduction in force actions that are coming down, as mandated recently by the Office of Management and Budget. All those reductions in force and layoffs need to be rapidly responded to with emergency demonstrations. Maybe it's pickets, maybe it's press conferences, maybe it's large rallies, whatever the unions can muster locally with the support of the broader public. We're calling it the Let Us Work campaign. We dispute the legality of these layoffs. We contend that this is the executive branch undermining Congress's power of the purse because they mandated that these programs be implemented, and they're gutting the agency's ability to actually execute those programs. And so we, as the workers who do that work, want to protect any of ourselves and our coworkers who get terminated and call out the broader public to support us as those things happen. So it's called the Let Us Work campaign. We're actively training and developing toolkits for local unionists to develop those rapid response capabilities. And then as they hit city after city and agency after agency, we hope that we can build an escalating campaign to mobilize the public to defend the civil service alongside us as federal unionists. But we're not going to win this on our own. We're going to need the broader labor movement and the broader public to stand with us if we're going to have a chance to stop them. So that's what we're planning next.
Well, I'm excited to see how it develops, and excited to participate in it here in Huntsville and North Alabama. We've got some town halls and some rallies that we're planning, coinciding with the congressional recess, and I'm sure that we'll try to link it up with what y'all are doing nationwide as well. So really excited for you to for this work to continue. I'm curious about the media blitz part of it as its own thing. Not only were you on a lot of these news channels, but so were other people in the fun. MT Snyder, an NLRB attorney, was on CNN as well, and some others. There was an AFGE member who worked at the VA who was on, I think, CNN or NBC, something like that. And so there was a lot of people that y'all put in front of the media. And so, whether as you personally or from a network perspective, I'm interested in takeaways from, really kind of having the eyes and ears of the nation for the last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the media has generally gotten the basic picture, which is that this is an attack on the federal workforce. It's a historic attack, and therefore the people immediately experiencing that attack need to be heard from. And we have, I think, responded pretty well, given that we're a very young organization just now building up a strategic communications plan. And, some of the spokespeople that you mentioned are definitely out front. We want to develop an army of federal workers capable of sharing with the public what it is they specifically provide. I'll actually, do it right now real quick, because I think all of us do something that's not only congressionally mandated, but important to the American people. I'm a value engineer. My job is to make sure that any large contracts that go out of the Army Corps of Engineers benefit from the interrogation and participation of outside experts in the relevant fields of the contract in question. So what's that for? It's for government efficiency, to make sure taxpayer money isn't wasted. So all of their premise in the Doge and all of Musk's rhetoric is actually it's duplicating. It's not duplicating. It's actually destroying the very government efficiency that's mandated by Congress already. So I think all of us need to tell the public what we do, why it's so critical to them. And for that, we're going to need more than a handful of people to be our spokespeople. We need all federal workers to become the surface area of our movement to the broader public and to be heard, so that folks can appreciate that. So I think we've responded pretty well, given how young of an organization we are. We have a lot to build up. We just did a big spokesperson training yesterday. We're going to be doing a lot more of them. We're crafting narratives that can connect our experience as federal workers providing these necessary services to the public. And I think that that's going to be necessary in the weeks and months ahead, as we erode the narrative that they're trying to push, which is, I think, pretty obviously bad faith. But I don't want to assume that your average Trump supporter out there assumes that it's bad faith. So the only way we're going to actually be able to convince them that it's bad faith and that what we provide is actually essential and that this is an attack on them as much as it is an attack on us, that's going to be up to us to, one, continue to use the national platform as best we can. But that's what we call the air war, right? The CNN appearances, the MSNBC, that national media communication strategy. The air war will continue, but we will not win just through an air war. We need an organizing ground game that's capable of giving expression to those, to orders of magnitude more federal workers to go out into their communities, into their congregations, into their school boards, into their neighborhoods, everywhere that federal workers live needs to hear what's so important about what we do. So our communication strategy that you're highlighting and asking about, I think, has been necessary, but it's just the beginning. We're going to have to train an army of people to speak publicly about what they do, something that federal workers aren't traditionally encouraged to do. But now is the time, because if we don't, then I think they'll get away with dominating the narrative in the months ahead, and it's going to take years to clean up the mess that they've made.
Yep. Absolutely. Speaking of narratives, we have this clip here from Marjorie Taylor Greene that I'm interested in your response to. And it seems like she's, at least in part, I know there's been several protests organized by different organizations, AFGE, NTEU, IFPTE, the Democrats. They've all organized protests. So I don't think it's just responding to you, but I think it is at least in part, responding specifically to some of the fund's protests across the country. Here is Marjorie Taylor Greene about what she thinks about federal workers.
You can protest all you want outside of departments of this government. You can protest all you want, but the American people disagree with you. You're protecting the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is not a business. Those are not real jobs producing federal revenue. By the way, they're consuming taxpayer dollars. Those jobs are paid for by the American tax people who work real jobs, earn real income, pay federal taxes, and then pay these federal employees. Federal employees do not deserve their jobs. Federal employees do not deserve their paychecks. And these are jobs that can be fired at will.
What's your response to that, Chris?
I like how she calls us tax people. We're all just tax people. these like the notion that the government, and let's remember, what does the government do? What do all these bureaucrats do? What do? I estimate the cost of civil works projects, flood walls, levees, storm surge barriers, to make sure that the private sector who winds up building those things doesn't fleece the taxpayer. So who's actually looking out for the tax people, as she says? Think about what they do in the EPA. I think Jon Stewart did it really well. Like the notion that the guy who makes sure that the fecal matter content in your drinking water isn't too high, the idea that that's an unnecessary position. We're literally the people who make sure that all the laws that were passed are carried through. I mean, there's nothing, this is a point I made on Democracy Now! There's nothing we do that's not mandated by Congress. So even if you don't like what it is that we do, we're doing it because it's mandated by Congress, and historically, previous presidents have carried out their executive duty to implement the laws passed by Congress. I think, you got to be able to read between the lines. When a con artist like Trump or Musk or Green gets in front of you and tells you that the selfless people who work our butts off and generally are way understaffed. I don't know a single agency that's so comfortably staffed that people can loaf. Like, we're all working way more than we should be. In fact, there's a ton of inefficiencies associated with the demand for overtime because we're understaffed. Like, if you actually want to make the government more efficient, you probably have to staff up, because right now there's all kinds of extra taxpayer people money that's going towards making the services work, at least historically. I mean, now they're just throwing it all out. But what's Marjorie Taylor Greene and Musk's and Trump's actual goal here? I mean, these are billionaires. She's not a billionaire. She's a millionaire, but she's a wannabe billionaire who wants to make the entire government subject to speculation. They want to make everything that we do something that's exposed to for-profit contracting. They want to turn the Army Corps of Engineers, my agency, into a contractor-only company where maybe there's a handful of government bureaucrats responsible for shoveling taxpayer funds to private sector folks to do everything we do already, but more expensively, because now there's a profit motive and there's probably a monopoly market there in the first place. Like, there's so many inefficiencies associated with their vision. It gives lie to the efficiency narrative. But the real thing here is that these are people who don't see the role of government in protecting the basic interests. These are folks who, if they ran your town, would privatize the fire department. Right? Think very locally and concretely about what a government service done not for profit does currently, and think about how that service might be distorted if suddenly the profit motive were introduced to it. That's these people's vision for our future, for our society, and they're liars. I mean, the government is the smallest it's ever been as a share of the overall economy. They're liars, and we have to begin to help people better understand how these are con artists.
Yep. Chris Doles, president of IFPTE Local 98 at the Corps of Engineers in New York, also on the steering committee for the Federal Unionists Network. Where can people find more about your Let Us Work campaigns, and particularly for federal workers? Where can they get plugged in?
So everybody can go to the same site, which is go.savepublicservices.com. That'll redirect you to our current action network sign up, which if you're a federal worker, there'll be a box to check. Make sure to check that. And you'll probably get additional information inviting you to get deeper involved in the network. But if you're not a federal worker, don't check that box and you'll still be getting all the information. So it's go.savepublicservices.com. You'll read a little bit more about this Let Us Work campaign. We are going to be doing a launch event. It's likely to be Thursday. Sign up there and you'll get the information for it. We're hoping to have a bunch of federal workers articulate our vision for this movement, but also a number of allies. We're hoping to get, other national leaders of the labor movement, including the federal labor movement, as well as some electeds and some folks from the broader movement that we have to build together if we're going to have a chance to fight this. So that's probably going to be Thursday night, but sign up at go.savepublicservices.com to get that information. And plug in. I mean, everybody right now needs to become an organizer. And for that to happen, folks really need to get plugged in. And I think the fund is a great place, especially for federal workers. But even if you're not, it's a great place to learn how to answer our call, to do those rapid responses as the waves of terminations threaten whatever agency happens to be near you. So you can come out, meet some federal workers, and be part of the movement.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for the work that you're doing. We're going to take a break really quick, and we'll be right back with Boss Watch.
Thanks, bud.
The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communications system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Got about 100 people watching us on YouTube. Appreciate everybody there. 63 folks have liked the stream. Go ahead and do that if you haven't yet. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us on Facebook. Joe and Mel, as always, good morning. Let's get to Boss Watch. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what employers were up to in the southern United States and across the country. We have historically been doing this segment by pulling press releases from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, the Department of Labor, and the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor to see how the federal government is protecting workers from their employers, but there continues to be, as there has not been since the Trump administration took office, there continues to be no new enforcement actions or announcements of resolution of ongoing enforcement actions, a significant reduction from the last several years. But we do have a sort of policy memo out from the EEOC that is interesting, as well as a news story. We'll start in Texas, where the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, is alleging that the Corpus Christi School District in Texas has been stealing wages from its members by not following Davis-Bacon bidding rules. Channel 3 News in Corpus Christi reports that Marshall Morin has worked in the electrical field for more than 10 years, but said he has never gotten the opportunity to work on a Corpus Christi School District project because of the Davis-Bacon wage violations. It's not right, he said, quote, I mean, it's directly affecting our community. We're all products of CCISD. We are all basically being undercut because our wages can't be paid, or they're not required to be paid at that rate, so our contractors, therefore, cannot bid that work with our composite rate. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers has 800 members in South Texas, with nearly 400 in Corpus Christi who claimed they've faced unfair pay over the past 20 years, working on CCISD projects such as Carroll High School and the new middle school off Yorktown. The change in 2023, when David Karanko became the first to take the CCISD to court, that changed in 2023 when David Karanko became the first to take CCISD to court, claiming it was not following Davis-Bacon prevailing wages. That's the standard set for minimum wages in the profession. Quote, but this has been going on for the last 2 decades, which is CCISD has been failing to abide by the law and adopting third-party wage packages, which the 13th Court of Appeals has just recently, as of December of last year, determined is unlawful. David Karanko said CCISD has asked his union to draft a proposed settlement by the next school board meeting, which is on Monday, March 24th. The EEOC release that I was talking about came from EEOC Acting Chair Andrea Lucas, who announced that, quote, the EEOC is putting employers and other covered entities on notice. If you are part of a pipeline contributing to our immigration crisis or abusing our legal immigration system via illegal preferences against American workers, you must stop. The law applies to you, and you are not above the law. The EEOC is here to protect all workers from unlawful national origin discrimination, including American workers. Now, interestingly, this is me coming out of the press release to add some commentary. This could foretell an interesting shift in emphasis regarding immigration enforcement. You know, typically immigration enforcement, including under Trump 1, is simply used as a cudgel against undocumented immigrants themselves. We talked about how in Mississippi there was a sexual harassment lawsuit that was won by a union which represented workers at a poultry plant. They won $2.5 million from the employer, and only months after that, ICE came and raided the facility, deporting hundreds of workers, obviously in retaliation for their exposing the sexual harassment of the managers. Now, if they take it in a different way by using the EEOC to go after employers instead of undocumented immigrants, that's interesting, you know. But this press release was pointed towards employers, not undocumented immigrants. So it continues, quote, unlawful bias against American workers in violation of Title VII is a large-scale problem in multiple industries nationwide, Lucas said. Many employers have policies and practices preferring illegal aliens, that's his word, migrant workers, and visa holders or other legal immigrants over American workers in direct violation of federal employment law prohibiting national origin discrimination. Cracking down on this type of unlawful discrimination will shift employer incentives, decreasing demand for illegal alien workers, again, his word, and decreasing abuse of the United States legal immigration system. Employers have many excuses for why they may prefer non-American workers, but none of those are legally permissible reasons to violate Title VII. None of the following are legally permissible reasons to violate Title VII. Lower cost labor, whether due to payment under the table to illegal aliens or exploiting rules around certain visa holder wage requirements. A workforce that is perceived as more easily exploited in terms of the group's lack of knowledge, access, or use of wage and hour protections, anti-discrimination protections, and other legal protections, customer or client preference, and biased perceptions that foreign workers are more productive or have a better work ethic than American workers. Another quote from Lucas, the law is clear. The prohibition on national origin discrimination applies to any national group, including discrimination against American workers in favor of foreign workers. The EEOC is going to rigorously enforce the law to protect American workers from national origin discrimination. So, interesting. We'll see what happens there. And we'll wrap up with Union Busters, a segment of Boss Watch, sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Last week, LabCorp in Portland hired East Coast Labor Relations, doing business as Reliant Labor Consultants, for $3,500 per day. East Coast Labor Relations provides union avoidance services to employers. They advertise that their consultants are, quote, former high-ranking union officials and that they are bilingual. The language on Reliant Labor Consulting's website is identical. Their services include avoiding, preventing, and fighting a union. This is the firm, you'll remember, that Joe Brock is president of. You'll remember from Boss Watch a couple of weeks ago that he was president of the Teamsters Local 830 in Philadelphia before he lost an election and took his ball to the other side of the fence and started fighting for the bad guys. But fortunately, his fancy pants consulting BS didn't pay off this time because workers there won their union 79-23. Also, he's going to be on the show next weekend, so really excited for that. Masonite hired LRI Consulting Services for $425 an hour, and Bob Evans Farms hired LRI Consulting Services for $425 per hour. There is an active union election there. The following LM20s were amended. Heightened Solutions amended their LM20 for Northwestern Medical Center to add their compensation rate of $300 an hour. Workers won their union there by 150 to 45. Alley's Transportation amended their LM20 for Amazon DAX5 in North Carolina to add their compensation rate of $2,000 per day. The owner of Alley's Transportation is Algeron Wright, who is a self-described HR professional in Swansea, South Carolina, who also is a gospel and inspirational recording artist. His band is called Algeron Wright and Triumphant Praise on Spotify. This doesn't seem very Christian to get $2,000 per day to tell workers not to organize, but what do I know?
I'll pray for him.
There you go. Adam, 30 seconds. Do you have any plugs?
Go to labornotes.org/events. Check out any trainings they have coming up. We are the Labor Council here in North Alabama is holding an advocacy day with Alabama Rise on Sunday, March 9th in Huntsville. So definitely check that out. Go to alarise.org if you want to find out more.
There you go, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We have a whole second half of the program. We got a lot of good stuff. We got some Matt Walsh clips to react to, some more voicemails, and we'll be interviewing Beth Howard about her book, Rednecks for Black Lives. So find us on Facebook and YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you don't do that, though, we'll see you next week. All right, off the radio now. Appreciate everybody hanging tight. As you can tell, we kind of switched up the programming this week because, and we did that basically as a practice run, because I think starting either next week or the week after that, we're going to be carried live on the radio in Chattanooga. We're already on the radio in Chattanooga, but just a recording of the program plays on Sunday evenings, and I think that they are going to run us live, but only from 10 to 11, right? The first half of the program is 9:30 to 11, and so we figured that we could just kind of jump right into the show while we're on the radio in Huntsville and online, not do the big, the longer introduction and about the show, and then do that after we come back from the break at 10 o'clock. That way, the folks in Chattanooga get the introduction and the context as well. And so, hope that wasn't too disorienting. I didn't get any negative feedback about that in the chat. So, let us know if that made you feel really, really weird. But I think that's probably how we're going to be doing it going forward. But interested in feedback on that. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and go to a break really quick, and we'll be right back with the second half of the program. So stay tuned.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. The line is open, so feel free to call in. I saw last week that the Next Generation Carriers podcast, that's a podcast by letter carriers, one of whom is in Florida and the other in Massachusetts, I think. The one in Massachusetts, I think, is the president of his local branch, I think he said. Next Generation Carriers had Brian Renfro on for a 2.5-hour conversation. I know that we've collected a lot of letter carrier listeners over the last year or so I figured y'all would be interested in knowing about that if you didn't already. And I pulled a couple of things that are kind of big picture folks that I think that people in the audience might be curious about. And then for the for the rest of the stuff, they got pretty in the weeds about some questions that I'm sure is valuable to letter carriers, but maybe kind of less so for other people. But on big picture things, starting with the contract itself, there was just a mention in a question of concessions in the contract, and Renfro was very, very adamant that there were no concessions in the contract. Here is that back and forth.
Are we going to sacrifice the 1260 or any of those, or is that locked in? Are we stuck with these concessions?
Well, I would not call them concessions. I'd be curious what you thought were concessions first.
Concession? What my thing is?
Yeah. What part of the agreement do you view as a concession compared to what we have now?
The labor movement's built around 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of sleep, and what you will. Mm-hmm. If we're gonna allow people to work over 12 hours, say you have two people working over 12 hours, that's 8 hours right there. That's a third worker. That is a concession. We should be advancing the labor movement. We should be creating a firm 10-hour limit. If someone wants overtime at 10 hours, they should be able to work at 10 hours and clock out. So it is a concession. And I'm not the only one that's saying it's a concession. That's one of the hottest topics right now is the 1260. We should not have to volunteer to make poverty wages. And that's a fact. Our wages have declined. In 2006, the starting pay for a PTF was like $20 an hour. So it is a concession. We don't know what USPS's first offer was 2 years ago, but a lot of people want to know is not just the wage stuff, but people want to know, is everything back on the table, and what is not on the table, and what are we as NALC keeping?
Okay, well, first off, let's be clear about what was in the chain of agreement, because it sounds like there's some misunderstanding. The only changes to maximum work hours, the only changes are this. Letter carriers who right now are told they have to work beyond maximum work hours would no longer have to do that. They would have contractual protection against discipline for clocking out and going home, whatever instruction they're given. That's one change. The second change is those that are on the overtime desired list, if they volunteer, they could work beyond those hours. That's the only change to maximum work hours. Oh, there is one more in the TA. That if they volunteered to work over or worked over for any reason, they would be paid a new pay rate of 2.5 times pay. That's the only change. There's no change to the overtime desired list options in terms of work assignment, or I don't want to be on the list. There's no change to Article A, Section 5F about what the normal hours are, 8 hours, normally no more than 10. None of that changes. So the only piece that I look at here is this. One of the major problems we have around the country in areas that end up in, mostly it happens in places that have staffing issues, obviously, is continuous violations of what Arbitrator Mittenthal said 37 years ago. And that is that the work hour limitations in Article 8 are absolute. And then we've had 36 years of arbitration decisions and agreements made about why it's not absolute. And letter carriers are constantly forced to work past the maximum work hours. This is an agreement that was made to stop that and put the power in the hands of the letter carrier. It does not change anyone that's not on the overtime desired list. It doesn't change those who are on the work assignment to work past 10. It doesn't change the impact, as I said, of Article 8, Section 5.
So there you go. He said that not a concession. So they also talked later about reduced office time. That was one of the concessions that some folks had identified, that they felt like the tentative agreement reduced office time where carriers could be in the office kind of doing some of the organizational work. And Renfro was also adamant that that was not a concession, saying that it just modifies the way that it's calculated. And so presumably Renfro's argument would be that this means that the office time could potentially be expanded rather than reduced. And, so I don't know. You'll have to make of that what you will. But that was his argument. He doesn't believe there are any concessions. There was also a question about the timeline, right? And that's been a huge, that's just been such a huge topic of conversation. And no doubt it's frustrating, the negotiations have been going on now for 2 years. And so the question was put to him, why didn't we go to arbitration in summer of 2023? And this is how he responded.
Arbitration in the summer of 2023.
Yeah, because we were, making progress in negotiation. We made progress in negotiations for months. And, ultimately, you guys have probably all heard me say this. When we came to the point of tentative agreement, we did that because I did not think we would do better in interest arbitration, and I still don't think we'll do better. Just thinking realistically, particularly with everything that's going on now, all the uncertainty. And when I say do better, I'm not talking about any one specific, part of the agreement. There's ways to, look at the economics and increase something here and maybe do something differently over here. I'm speaking just generally. Arbitration after a rejected ratification vote, however, is a different animal. So in some ways, the challenge of the uncertain world that we live in now, it kind of remains to be seen that how that balances out with the idea that the tentative agreement, was rejected, and letting the arbitrator know that this is, very clearly, here's hard evidence of the members' expectation. So, it was that. And look, no different in 2019, 2020, no different in 2016 into 2017, or all the way back to the arbitration process in 11 and 12. As long as we thought we were making progress, we kept negotiating, and eventually, I made that decision, and the members are always right, though. That's something that's true in the history of our union. And whatever the outcome is here,
And so, I don't think he really answered the question in my opinion. The question was, the words were, why don't we go to arbitration sooner? But then he said, but the way that he responded was like, well, going to arbitration after you get a contract rejection gives you more leverage in arbitration. It's like, that's true. And it is true that you didn't have a contract rejection in summer of 2023, but like the actual argument would have been that you would have had a contract rejection by summer of 2023, right? And so that was frustrating to hear, because the question was obviously why were negotiations so slow? Why are we only at this stage? It's not, why didn't we skip a TA and contract vote and go straight to arbitration in 2023. You know, I mean, that's
Right.
just not what the question was, and that was frankly pretty frustrating.
Yeah, people just want to know what took so long.
Yeah, exactly. So then there was a question about the media, and this is something that we've noticed as, you know, folks who are kind of covering some of this, is that there has just been a lot more from the union, a lot more communication from the union about what is happening at the bargaining table. And so they asked him about that increase in, you know, engagement online and, you know, and from him as the president.
So there's a lot of chatter with people talking about how in the past month or so, the NALC has really stepped up its game with the Fight Like Hell rally, the Facebook posts, and there's been a question of why wasn't that happening all along? Or is this something that's happening in the background that people don't know, and now there's more of a push? I think a lot of guys wanted to see more of that social output on social media from the NALC.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I guess let me take it in a couple pieces. First, the campaign that we branded Fight Like Hell, we had an official kickoff. I don't know, what was that? Not this past week, the week before, was in part developed because we knew this type of battle would come. We did not, necessarily know when. It was sort of undefined. But we knew under this administration and with the current makeup of Congress, and maybe even more so, just if you notice, you hadn't heard a peep from a Republican in Congress about this whole potential executive order. That's because they are all scared to death of the president and the administration. So there's an interesting dynamic there. Anyway, we knew that was coming. So that was a big part of the Fight Like Hell campaign. In terms of the social media stuff surrounding that and otherwise, look, we constantly are working to do the very best we can on social media. I will tell you the truth. We have a whole building full of employees in Washington, D.C. We have great people that work doing digital and all that sort of stuff. And, it's a place where we push and push and push. And I do think it's gotten better. It's gotten better from my perspective, but I think it's also out of necessity. You notice it's probably been more aggressive. It's probably been a little more defiant. And that's just simply because there are challenges out there that we face. But I think we always have to try to get better. We are going to really get our podcast back up and going. Probably going to record an episode tomorrow. And then, just keep doing, because what we do on social media, of course, a huge part of it is information for the members, but also a huge part of it is, that's an increasing piece. That's a place of influence on Capitol Hill with staffers for members of Congress, some more than others, but that there's also sort of a strategy behind it in terms of using it as an effective tool as part of, advocacy efforts. So I think the campaign and, maybe the uptick you've seen is intentional, but it is really due to the circumstances and the fact that we've got challenges in front of us that we have not had in years. So it requires a
So there you go. That was his answer to why they've been increasing the engagement about the contract campaign. And finally, I wanted to give you his answer to a question about caucuses and groups that are, pushing the union in one way or another, that I thought was interesting. And then, again, I'll encourage folks, if they want to hear more, like I said, it was a 2.5 hour podcast, so you can find it on Next Generation Carriers on YouTube and presumably wherever you get your podcasts, but YouTube is where I saw it. So here's his answer to a question about caucuses.
So, Brian, some branch presidents have come out in their newsletters as of recently discussing these different caucuses going on and saying that they're divisive and disruptive to the union, going as far as to almost call them as trying to break the union. How do you feel about that? And do some of these things that these groups do that attract attention, Are you ever willing to meet with them and figure out what the NALC could do to attract attention and affect members the way that they're able to reach out to them and sit across the table and see things that they're working towards or ideas they have?
Look, I don't. To me, we're all letter carriers, and we're all the NALC. I don't see or really view our union as, having, caucuses or groups that are split one away from the other. I mean, I will talk to any member of the union about anything. Now there's only 24 hours in a day, but the fact that someone has some sort of association with any individual or group, that's not important to me. I don't make any decisions based on any of that politically. I think if you look at, I've got people that are friends that I've worked with for a long time that are involved in different things, that they feel like is in the best interest of, I presume they feel like is in the best interest of the union. So, I think there's 280 something thousand for us. And I think there's room for every single one that wants to be involved. There's room for every single one that wants to, have some influence or have a say. We are the most democratic, little d, democratic union in America. And the discussions that, take place around the country, whether that's in the form of, my preference obviously would be for that kind of stuff to happen at branch meetings and within the constitutional structure of the union. I do think there is potential harm in, creating different caucuses if they do result in division. But I can tell you from my perspective, that division is not something that I hold that affects, what we as a union do, the stuff that I have control over.
So there you go. Like I said, if you want to see the rest of that interview, you can go to Next Generation Carriers. It's good of Renfro to be willing to take these questions from folks. And those are some of the bigger picture things. I thought that was generally a good, generally a good answer on the caucuses thing. He stayed away from some of the more inflammatory rhetoric that it sounds like some branch presidents have been engaging in. I think that the existence of caucuses is evidence of, a vibrant kind of small d democratic ethos within a union, and is not something that's bad or necessarily divisive. And so I thought that answer was I thought that it was good that he stayed away from some of the more inflammatory rhetoric there. We have on the line Beth Howard. Beth Howard is the author of a memoir from Haymarket Books titled Rednecks for Black Lives, and the Appalachia People's Union director of Surge, showing up for racial justice. She lives in Lexington, Kentucky, but grew up in a rural white working class community in eastern Kentucky. She's organized in the American South for 17 years, primarily in Kentucky. Beth, welcome to the program.
Hey, y'all. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. And I want to just dive right in with what Jacob just stated about your upcoming book, Rednecks for Black Lives, because I think that is a powerful title. It's an attention-getting title. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, what you hope readers will get away from it, and what motivated the title itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here and to be talking to working class people and workers. My name is Beth Howard, and I am in Kentucky. I'm a proud Appalachian Eastern Kentuckian. And I've been a longtime organizer in the South and also a writer. And so this book is a memoir. And so the full title is Rednecks for Black Lives, a story of working class solidarity from a coal miner's daughter. And it's my story about how a working class white woman in rural Appalachia goes through a transformation around race and class to seeing my shared interest in fighting for racial and economic justice as a white woman. And the title is based on an essay I wrote in 2020 that went viral during the summer of the largest, uprising for racial justice I'd ever witnessed in my lifetime. And, like many people, I remember during that time looking at my social media feed and seeing, first of all, seeing so many people in Appalachia and the South really on the right side of this issue, saying, standing up for the movement for Black lives, saying, police brutality against Black people has to stop. And then also I saw a lot of working class white people in my region taking the side of police in this and holding up this thin blue line. If you just comply with police, you won't get murdered, and a lot of really, really hateful things. And all I could think about during that was a story from my own region that is very similar to a lot of union campaigns in the South around, in this story in particular, is the Battle of Blair Mountain in West Virginia in 1921, when a group of 10,000 coal miners, white, Black, and brown, fought together for their right to unionize in the largest labor uprising in this country's history. And, I thought about how all of those working class white coal miners, fought alongside immigrants and Black miners for their rights as workers and their right to unionize. And it was hard to see this kind of turn in so many, I think, really good-hearted, well-meaning white people in my region. And I just thought, when did we start siding with cops over other workers, right? And how can we start to see our shared interest in standing in this moment of really important solidarity to be visible with other working class people on this issue? And so I stayed, I kept thinking, somebody needs to say something, somebody from the region needs to say something to kind of remind us of our ancestry and call us into our best selves. And I kept waiting, and then I was like, maybe I'm the person who should say something. So I worked on an essay that been, for days. And if you're a writer, you kind of know what I kind of was going through of writing draft after draft, that I was like, this just ain't it. This is not good. This is not the thing. And I was kind of workshopping different titles, like what's a slogan or what's a way into this. And then, a colleague said, what about Rednecks for Black Lives? And I was like, that's it. And so I stayed up all night writing this essay. And I think it really struck a chord. And so here I am, 5 years later, about to put out this book, which is, it starts from that premise of what can a working class white person understand about themselves, and start to connect the dots around class in this country, so that we can start to see, not just see, but also actively side in every way possible with Black people, with immigrants, with trans people right now, instead of white people who are billionaires who don't have our best interest at heart just because they're white.
Yeah. Beth, I wanted to say that this really touches on the long history of solidarity, between Black and white workers in the South, and not just Black and white, but multiracial, multigender. There's a long tradition of this kind of diverse solidarity in the South. But, as you said, there's also this long history of division. So what are some of those lessons from the past that you've been looking at that you think are relevant for labor organizers today in terms of building this sort of diverse people power?
Yeah, absolutely. I think studying any of the labor movements in Appalachia, in my region, especially the United Mine Workers of America, in my own state, in Harlan County, there were some of the fiercest, bloodiest labor battles in our country's history as well. And so sometimes I like to just watch Harlan County, USA, and look at and watch this very real story of working class people. And again, it was a majority white place, and also it was multiracial effort of these people coming together to, fight for each other against authoritarian, like an authoritarian system, right? That, our government has always been in the pocket or aligned with big coal companies and money holder, the ruling class, and they have always weaponized police and the government, through like really corrupt policies and politicians to make sure that workers don't rise up and they don't unionize. And so in this time where things feel so very bleak and feel really difficult, I also think about how this is an opportunity to organize. And so, yeah, I love looking through old books and history books, and also watching documentary films. And so, yeah, Harlan County, USA is one, the film Mate one, and then there's a really beautiful documentary about the mine wars in West Virginia that I think came out through PBS. I also just think about all of the CIO organizing and the Wobblies at this time where, we were seeing so much wealth inequality. And then to take that, whatever that wealth gap was, and it's so much bigger now, right? It's huge. And I also think about people, I'm a white woman here in the South. And I also think about Ann and Carl Braden, who were Kentuckians. And I've been talking about them and thinking about them a lot. Ann Braden was a Southern woman from Alabama, actually. She was born in Louisville, grew up in Alabama in Anniston, and then moved back to Louisville. And she met Carl Braden, who was a radical trade unionist. And, they were both journalists and kind of committed to telling stories about the Jim Crow South. And showing the brutality, and also to lift up labor struggles. Also she really talked to white women a lot about what it meant when we were siding with whiteness, and especially being weaponized to encourage and protect violence from the Klan and from white supremacists onto Black men and Black people in general. And she was part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which, was the civil rights movement in the South. And so there were a group of people like Ann, like Carl Braden, like Bob Zellner, who I believe is from Alabama, who were, told by SNCC at one point to, we love having you here. You're our siblings in the struggle. And actually racism is happening in white communities, right? The Klan is recruiting from white people. And so we want you to go organize other white people. And so I feel like I'm also kind of in that ancestry and lineage of white Southerners, white working class people who are trying to organize my people away from the far right and away from siding with billionaires at the expense of all working class people. And so I also like to read those stories about what it was like in the 60s in the Jim Crow South and before that, right? And all of those generations of people who were fighting against authoritarianism in some of the toughest conditions. And I think that this applies to any of us working class white people, and especially when we look at unions, it has always been in the playbook of the ruling class to peel white people away from the coalition, right? So, a boss will always try to separate the workers in, different ways, right? Let's offer the white people a management job or give them a raise, or say, we're not going to fire you if you, turn your back on these folks. And when I think about the miners in Blair Mountain, they were not not racist in the beginning, right? The coal operators at that time, And there's one in particular that is really interesting to read about. His name was Justice Collins. They separated the miners into segregated housing. And so he called it a judicious mixture, where he would take a third of the four white miners, a third of black miners, a third immigrant miners, and put them in separate housing and find every way that they could to stir up conflict between them. And the good organizers of the United Mine Workers of America and the Wobblies came in and were able to bring them together, despite those differences. And they became a powerful unionized force, because the ruling class knows that if they keep us fighting each other, then they can win. And so we have to know that as white people, they're always going to offer us some cookie, right? Here's a little bit more safety, right? If you side with whiteness, if you protect, the part of you that is white, like, at least you're not going to be treated like an immigrant. At least you're not going to be treated like Black people, right? And all of that is lies. And as long as we continue to do that, we all lose.
There was so much that resonated with me that you just said, and particular in terms of, the conditions in which people have organized interracially and in diverse coalitions, often in much tougher situations than what we're facing today. And in some ways we're facing, unprecedented crisis in this country, but it is always good to remember that there are folks, our forefathers and foremothers who came before us, who organized under, severe threats and under very difficult conditions, but they did it anyway, and they were able to win real wins for working people. And something else that comes to mind that I wanted to ask is, there is this idea, I think, that I run across a lot, and I know Jacob runs across it. There's this idea that, like, rural white Southern folks are kind of a lost cause. If you're looking for more progressive policies, more inclusive policies, however you want to frame that, the average rural, particularly rural, but, Southern white folks are just a lost cause. They're all reactionary. You can't reach them, that sort of thing. And obviously we don't agree with that assessment, or we wouldn't do what we do.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what have you found, about some of these misconceptions, and what are some of the realities that you've encountered?
Yeah. And so, I work for Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is the largest national organization bringing white people into the fight for racial and economic justice, based on that lineage that we just talked about. And within Surge, I am the Appalachia organizing director. And so that means that, we are organizing on my team and the other Southern organizers at Surge, that we have people in Tennessee and Georgia, as well as Kentucky, which is my place, doing really deep work on the ground, with, a lot of multiracial groups, but also in predominantly white places. The state of Kentucky is 85% white. And so, we are going to be multiracial movement, absolutely, and we have to be. And in a state like Kentucky, you have to organize a lot of working class white people and a lot of rural people in order to win any significant change. And so the kind of organizing we are doing is kind of bringing people in small towns and rural communities around a material issue that impacts their lives. And so often it's been around housing, that people can't afford to live anywhere in their towns. Like, that is now true, not just for cities, but for rural places. Right. The housing they can afford is not fit to live in. And they want power. They want power as tenants, and as people who live in the South. And so what we are doing is, starting a material issue campaign. Like, I think a trade union is a great place to see this at work too. And through that, we see people showing up, being able to be transformed around other issues, whether that's race or gender, and so I helped co-found a group called Kentucky People's Union in Ashland, Kentucky. And, we are seeing, like, young Gen Z trans leaders having, organizing meetings with people who are middle age or above who have never had a significant relationship with anyone who was trans. And we are seeing, white people who had never had any significant relationship with someone who is Black, like now they're together fighting for housing. And we also use, we wear our red bandanas as a symbol of our heritage and our values, that we're not going to be divided by racism, right? And so that doesn't mean everything's perfect, but it does mean we hang in there together. And so I also helped co-found a group called the Rural Defenders Union, which is a network of rural people in this country who are sharing resources, who are training together, and fighting back in some of the toughest conditions in this country right now. And so when I hear people say, rural communities are a lost cause, they're the reason we can't have nice things. How can they be so ignorant? I think one, that plays right into the billionaire class's hands, right? They have taken this progressive vacuum in rural places and small towns and in the South, where liberals or progressive and even people on the left have said this isn't worth our time, and they have been more than happy to organize us. In that vacuum where we're not, they are talking to our people and they are talking about race all the time. They're saying, I hear you, you're suffering, right? You don't have housing, you can't feed your family. And we are with you, we support you. And you know who you should blame for that? Immigrants, Black people, trans kids, right? And it has been my experience over and over that we have to knock doors in rural places and in small towns and give people a better offer than white supremacy. I think that better offer is class solidarity. And I've seen over and over again that people are more than willing to come along with us on that, and that they can be transformed and changed. I always say, like, people are just waiting on us to knock on their door and give them an offer, an opportunity to be a part of an organizing campaign. And finally, I'll say that rural people have always been part of some of the fiercest working class resistance in this country. We talked about, the mine workers unions, and those organizing efforts and those strikes. We also talked about the civil rights movement, often which took place in the rural South. And we can look at indigenous communities at Standing Rock. We can also talk about, after Reconstruction, a lot of, free states, that were organizing in rural places, who were saying, we don't want to do this, right? We don't want to be a part of this. And so I think it's at the detriment of all of us who want a better world to disregard and write off rural people.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, I think a lot of folks in the labor movement, many labor unions right now are wrestling with, how to talk about race and class in a way that does build solidarity rather than division. And so I'm just curious, what would you say to labor organizers and labor leaders who are wrestling with this within their own membership?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy. I think that every time that I get asked to speak somewhere, I'll usually have someone in the audience be like, how do I talk to this person who is very racist, and how can I move them? I'm sorry, these earpods keep coming out. And, my advice is always to ask a lot of questions, like help walk them through their thoughts and their reasoning for why and how they feel the way that they feel, opposed to telling them that they're wrong, or trying to point it out to them. Like, when we're knocking doors about housing, for example, it's like, and if someone says, my immigrant neighbor is the reason that my rent is so high, then it's like, is that your immigrant neighbor? Are they setting, your rent? Or is that the landlord, right? Like those kinds of good organizing questions that I think, good union organizers are training in all the time. And I think when we're talking about whiteness and race, that the dominant way of talking about that for years was kind of around this white privilege frame. And I really am pushing us away from that, me and a lot of other people, because I don't think it's effective. White privilege is real and it can be deadly, and it's not strategic. That's a really hard sell when you're knocking on doors in a trailer park in Eastern Kentucky, and you're telling someone.
You mean to tell me that telling folks they have it too good is not an effective strategy?
I'm telling you, right? Shocking.
Wow, that's crazy. We're learning some stuff on the show today, folks.
And so, we're at Surge really trying to use a shared interest framework, right? Instead of telling, very struggling white people, economically struggling white people, that they have to give up something to do this kind of work. It's instead how do we come together for the things that we all want, and we actually have something to gain in this, right? Working in solidarity with other working class people across race, often people will ask me well, what did you have to give up for, to do this work, and what have you lost? And I think for some people, they probably do lose relationships. I've been fortunate that has not been the case for me. In my case, it's only overwhelmingly opened my life up to more relationships, to winning, actual material changes in the world. So,
yes, absolutely. And, something that is on my mind is how there's usually a divide, I think, between these national progressive organizations and national forces and the realities of working class organizing here in the South. What do you think people outside the region maybe misunderstand or aren't clear about when it comes to building power down here?
Yeah. My colleague Stephen Smith and I, who are co-founders of the Rural Defenders Union, alongside Sean Sebastian with Rural Organizing, Kate Hess-Pace with Hoosier Action, and Chris Battle with Taproot Earth. One of the things that we just wrote about and spoke about on a podcast with Convergence Magazine is that kind of the reality that many places in the South have been living under authoritarianism for years now. And then, generationally, if we look at the Jim Crow South, right, and chattel slavery, we can look very directly at how, Nazi Germany was inspired by the Jim Crow South. It's not like Nazism is something that happened in Europe and then people are bringing it here. This was homegrown in the South. And so we really want people to think about the conditions that people are already living in. If I think about my state of Kentucky, we are so gerrymandered. Votes are so suppressed. I don't see our elections as being fair, and they haven't been in generations. Also, we have some of the harshest anti-trans laws in the entire country. And also, we are, I think, the 5th poorest state in the nation, and it is now illegal to sleep outdoors, right? Being unhoused is now criminalized. And so I could go on and on and on, and when we think about those conditions, people have been living and working in authoritarian conditions, incredibly oppressive conditions, and they've still been organizing. And so now the entire country is kind of experiencing what we have been living through here. And, I am not under any illusion that things will get worse for us. And that is terrifying. And also, I think we have a lot to teach the rest of the country about how to organize in these conditions. And so I think we're often treated as ignorant or, backwards and not knowing things, and people in cities need to train us and tell us and teach us. And I'm like, you all have a lot to learn from us here. And what, I really also hope people think about is, when are we as a left, as progressives, liberals, right? When are when are any of these forces, center left, going to take it seriously about investing in the South and in organizing in rural places and small town? Because our opponents take it very seriously. They have been dead serious about it. We are the ones not contending. And I think here, what organizing looks like in these conditions, we talked a lot about in our article and on the podcast, is like, we often are like, I was always trained to be like, let's do lobby meetings for, go to these corrupt legislators and try to make our case to them and see if we can move them, or let's have a rally and let's have a protest. And I think those same tactics are more and more not working in the kind of context that we're in. And so I think we have to be creative. And I see rural communities doing that, right? Like, instead of trying to appeal to these in power, let's try and replace them. Let's take their offices from them. Their elected offices. Let's run our own people. Let's, one of the examples Stephen gave was like a national funding group saying, here's this like millions of dollars for this ad campaign around abortion rights. And the organizer was like, for that, we could buy radio stations, Yeah. Like, let's do that. Let's purchase the local radio stations. Let's fight for housing in a way that is really rooted in people power, and creating the systems that we need to live in. And so anyway, I think that rural people really offer a lot to the rest of the country about this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Beth. And also, you definitely have at least two fans here of purchasing radio stations. We absolutely believe in the power of radio.
Oh, hell yes.
We know,
yeah.
We know, like you were saying, that the other side has been organizing and speaking to folks in these communities for a long time.
Yes.
And if you turn on the radio dial, most of what you hear is reactionary garbage that is, divide and conquer.
Yes.
And so that's why we do what we do. And yeah, really appreciate that point. And I'll just wrap up with saying, was there, do you have any final words or any, thoughts about why labor folks should take this work seriously, but also why folks outside of labor should be engaging with us, and how this all connects?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, for those of us who are white, in trade unions, union organizers, members, again, like kind of inoculating ourselves and each other against the ways that those in power use whiteness to pull us away from our working class siblings. And how can we right now show up in deep solidarity, just the way that others will show up for us, right? And that is really the only way we are going to get out of this. And that historically, it has been the only way that workers have been able to get out of this. And so I really take that upon myself to organize my own people towards that and away from white supremacy, that there's no safety and security, and that, this kind of work is the most rewarding, personally, but also materially, for all of us. And then I would also say that, community organizing. So, our group in Eastern Kentucky is called the Kentucky People's Union, and we're a community of, group of working class people, but we are trying to operate and think of ourselves as a union, outside of a traditional trade union, but how can we be a group of working class people that are a powerful force? And I think that's similar to the tenant movement, right? A different container and different power dynamics. And so when we're thinking about a general strike in 2028, or any of the ways that labor is putting themselves on the line right now, I think about a successful strike having the community organized, supporting and putting ourselves on the line with workers. And so I think there's a large part of rural people, community groups, tenants that want to do that. We're thinking in our circles, how can we contribute to a general strike, right? And how can we work alongside workers? And then how can we build that kind of trust and solidarity between our different groups, so that also when we need unions, that they'll show up for us too, and so I think we are open-hearted and welcoming in those collaborations.
Well, Beth, I really enjoyed the conversation. Again, the upcoming
Yeah.
book from Haymarket Books is Rednecks for Black Lives. Beth, thank you again for your time.
Yep. Thank you all for having me. This is so great. And I love talking to other working class Southerners. So thank you all.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thanks again. Yeah, really enjoyed that conversation, and the shared interest stuff is really important, because the way that reactionary sentiment is garnered is by trying to make folks believe that like she said, it's the immigrants, it's the trans, it's the blacks, et cetera, that's taking from you, when the reality is that if working folks came together across all of those different lines, then they'd be able to get more than anybody has, right? I mean, black folks having more isn't a challenge to working class white folks. It's a challenge to capitalists, black and white, right? And that's what history has shown, is that when working class people come together, we're able to make our lives better. So that really, really exciting. And I might end up, Adam was the one that booked her, and I might end up getting the book.
Well, there we go. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think there's a lot that resonates, and it speaks to what part of why we do what we do, and I think it is important that we try to reach all folks and not give up on people. Mm-hmm. There are folks who obviously are pretty deeply into propaganda and have been brainwashed, I would argue. But there are a lot of folks that, regardless of where they're coming from or what they may have heard, I think you can reach them with this shared interest and the reality that we can all rise up together. We can all benefit together because we do have common interest. Vast majority of us are working class. Vast majority of us have to sell our labor in exchange for money, and that's how we make a living. That's how we feed our families and pay our bills. And we all want better lives for ourselves and our families and our neighborhoods. And so together through solidarity, that's how we do that. And really appreciated that message.
We've got a caller on the line. The caller from a 617 area code. Caller from a 617 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, this is John Murphy down here in Naples, Florida, branch 4716. I am one of the co-hosts of Next Generation Carriers podcast. But I want to really quickly plug Matt Wan, Matewan. That film that was just mentioned earlier is a must watch. It's on YouTube. It's about the coal miners. That was one of the first labor movies I've ever watched in my life. It was back in 2006, and it got me on the path to actually fight for the working class. So everyone listening, please check it out. It's on YouTube. There's a couple of them. It's an hour and a half. There's one scene in the bar where they have their secret union meeting. And if that doesn't hit you in the gut, I don't know what will. That's a very powerful movie. I also called in to give you guys a big shout out. Thank you for featuring segments of the interview with Brian Renfro. Thank you. Going forward, though, like Renfro is very unclear on what is going on with expedited arbitration, right? Like there was no set dates yet. There's no idea what he's actually bringing to the table. And National NALC is going around telling people not to organize rallies for a fair contract, to focus solely on Save Our Services. And I'm pushing forward a petition that every branch should also jump on board with. Clearly, I'm not speaking as a branch member. I'm speaking as a rank and file, and I've already got my office on board. But if this is a serious crisis and Renfro is going to arbitration, the only two things that Renfro should be bringing forward in arbitration are wages and the abolishment of the CCA program, where we hire directly now to PTFs. If we want to save our service, those are the only two things in the contract that should be addressed right now. We don't know if he's going to try to revive the tentative agreement in some way during arbitration, because he did say there was no concessions. So a lot of members,
also said, Yeah, he also said, and I can't remember if this was in the clips that I pulled, but he also said somewhere that he still doesn't think that we're going to get better in arbitration than we got in the TA, like as an overall package. You know, maybe some things get better, but also some things get worse. He said he doesn't think that things are going to get better in arbitration. So that was kind of a bizarre thing to say. I hope that the Postal Service management doesn't use that in arbitration against y'all, but I don't know. But
yeah, there's a lot of confusion right now. I don't think anyone really knows what's going on because Brian Renfro is the sole person leading everything. Yeah, I think there's confusion with the executive council. The 2 days after we interviewed Mike Cariff, and he gave a way different story of what's happening. So I suggest a lot of carriers to check out our podcast. It's a 20-minute interview with Mike Cariff, the business agent out of Illinois. He gave a kind of a different explanation of going forward. So folks that are listening, please get a petition going. I'm also a co-chair or director or whatever you want to consider us with Bill of Fighting NALC. We'll probably publish the petition on our website, fightingnalc.com, in the coming days once we actually finalize the draft. And we encourage everyone on the ring, on the workroom floor, like, we cannot abandon this contract and the threat of privatization. This goes hand in hand. So yeah.
All right. Appreciate it, John. Thanks for the call. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
We got another caller on the line. This caller from a 603 area code. Caller from a 603 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going, y'all? My name's Hella. I'm calling from the Northeast United States.
Hella from the Northeast. What's on your mind?
I was listening to your interview with Eric Blanc last week. Thought it was a really, really amazing conversation. I think he did an amazing job just as a communicator, talking about this like vision for the labor movement. It's a vision that I have been, trying to see the edges of for a while now. I think we all have. I think that kind of worker-to-worker organizing is kind of all that the labor movement should be thinking about right now, especially as we're facing down these, crises of capitalism that you talk about every show. And I wanted to give a shout out to the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. Your last guest just mentioned them in passing. That movie Matewan touches on that history, and they're still around. We do, I think probably the best thing we do is the Organizer Training 101. It's a 2-day intensive course that's in person, like 2 8-hour days, that goes over the real concrete skills of having organizing conversations and maintaining a committee with a focus on direct action. Your listeners in the South, there's the Southern Coordinating Committee. That's at WOBSouth, WOBSOUTH.info. Reach out to them, check on the IWW.org, see if there's a branch near you. It's a great group of folks doing great organizing. Similar stuff to EWOC, no shade to them. And, if you're already in the union, I think the best way to forward the labor movement is to get involved with the union that you're already a part of. But if you are not organized and maybe you're in one of those industries that the typical unions kind of forget about, food service, retail, and there's a branch near you, I really recommend that you reach out. It's a great group of folks doing great work.
All right. Appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Yeah, really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Big believer of that Union Organizer 101 training. The Organizer 101 training is really good. Been through that, and really appreciate the good folks in IWW who are organizing throughout the country, throughout North America, I guess I should say. They've been doing it for a really, really long time. And their model of organizing without, relying on the NLRB and a formal contract, and that seems to be a lot more timely and relevant for today's conversations, right? And so I think the model they've developed and the experiences they've had, successes and challenges, are worth studying and worth looking at for sure. And I absolutely encourage folks, if you are one of the 9 out of 10 workers in this country who does not have a union, do know that there are folks out there like the IWW and like EWOC that you can reach out to for assistance. And if you run into, trouble contacting your local labor movement, the local unions in your area, those could be really good outlets for you. Folks who can get you plugged in and help coach you up. And the important thing to know is that every worker can have a union. Every worker deserves to have a union, and you can do it. You can do it. You and your coworkers together, you can make that happen with the right support, right resources, hopefully, a little bit of coaching, but it's definitely possible, and it is something that will transform your workplace and your lives.
Yep. We also got a voicemail last week responding to a caller who had a proposal about removing walking routes. So the caller said we should move all or most walking routes to mounted routes. There was also an acronym that he used that I didn't catch, CBU, that was that's basically like a box unit of, so if you go into like apartment complexes, I think that's what a CBU is, right? You go into an apartment complex and it's got this big wall of like PO boxes. And so like replacing walking routes with those and mounted routes. And so we had another letter carrier call in saying that would be bad. Here's his thoughts.
Hey, my name's Tucker. I'm a city letter carrier, branch 204 in Colorado Springs. Last week, you guys had someone call in, and he was adamant that the post office should put in these central box units where walking routes have been established. And it didn't seem like you guys knew much about it, so I just wanted to tell you, his point was completely 100% pro-management, pro-privatization. There's a customer cost associated when you want to make a walking route into a central box unit or a curbside. You're not going to get every customer to pay to have their box moved to the street or pay for a central box. Those central box units are, $1,000 a piece. You're not going to get a neighborhood to chip in $1,000 a piece, and then you have to get everyone in that neighborhood on board, establish an HOA, get everyone on board to create that. And then, there's the reduction in service standards that would happen. You're no longer getting mail to the door. You got to walk, on a snowy day or whatever to your central box unit and get your mail that way, which then you also have the risk of more theft. People will just yoink those central box units or crowbar them open when you could have just had your mail delivered straight to your door and be done with it. There's also job reductions. If you're pro-management, then sure, you're all about having less carriers to pay. But, if you have these walking routes, you have more carriers. And that's what we want as a union, is more carriers. So there's that. And then, this is something that carriers should be fighting against, not for. Not that, this is even a talking point of management. It's only a talking point of privatization. If you look up the Cato Institute Postal Service privatization plan, it's in there. They say make all the walking routes a centralized box unit. And then, all of a sudden a 8-hour route becomes a 4-hour route or a 2-hour route or something. And that's just getting rid of jobs. Not good for carriers. That guy that called in, incredibly misled, and definitely probably a Trumper or something like that. So thanks.
All right, so there you go. There's there's the debate. I don't want any more calls about walking routes versus mountain routes. You can call into Next Generation Carriers podcast. You got to call into a letter carrier podcast to debate what should the Postal Service do. But I'm inclined to agree with the voicemail. I think that's I think after he explained it, I think that seems like probably not a good idea. So I wanted to make sure that because we had the call that gave the pro mounted route, we had the voicemail, so we wanted to give it to you against the mounted route. So there you go, and you decide.
Fair and balanced.
Fair and balanced. One more Postal Service thing, and then we'll stop talking about the Postal Service for a little bit, because this was just so interesting. Because it's like the first time, and I also wanted, because we're going to continue talking about the negative impacts of the Trump administration on working people, on the Postal Service, on all of the federal services and government workers and the people that we service. I also wanted to bring to light this potentially positive thing from billionaire investor Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary. Obviously, generally speaking, going to be a bad guy, but this was he was interviewed by somebody, and he gave something that might not be a bad idea, both for the Postal Service and for actually efficient service to the American people by the government. So let's play this idea that he had for the Postal Service.
Let me ask you another question, different topic, quickly. The U.S. Postal Service coming under Commerce. I mean, where did that come from, and what is that about, and how will Americans deal with it? Will it affect their mail?
No, it won't affect their mail. So the concept was, I'm sitting with the president, and the costs of the post office are it loses $7 billion. And he said, can you do something with it? And I said, sure. So I saw him the next day, he goes, okay, what do you got? He gives me a whole 24 hours to figure it out. And I said, well, the Commerce Department does the census. And we spend $40 billion every 10 years doing the census. And that means we hire 625,000 people. And they go and they rent cars and gas, and you pay them food. And you know what they do? They go to every household in America and count the people. What department do we already have that already employs 625,000 people? It's got cars, already has gas, goes to every household. Can you imagine saying to your postman, can you count the people in the house? What day could he do the census? Monday? Could he double check it on Tuesday? How about Wednesday? He goes every day. So we can only save $40 billion or $4 billion a year, and we'll do a better job. And you know what else we can do with the post office? They can go to your house when you have a baby and give you the form for Social Security. And the 20,000 Social Security offices that we have, we just don't need them. We actually can do real customer service. Go right to your house. Someone died, here's the forms, you can fill it out. I'll bring them to your house. Customer service. Why? Because we've got those people. Let's use the assets of the government to make us better and save us money.
Now, that last thing that he said, use the assets of the government to make us better and save us money. I mean, that is genuinely how we should be looking at government. Now, Howard Lutnick has proposed in the past privatizing the Postal Service, which would mean enriching whoever buys it, selling it off for scraps, degrading service, et cetera, et cetera. But if we want to talk about actually invigorating the public service and utilizing the assets for the service of the American people, that is a good idea. And so the Postal Service doing the census, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. And the Postal Service even doing some functions of the Social Security Administration doesn't necessarily sound like a bad idea. Now, he mentioned there at the end closing all of the rural Social Security offices, and that probably seems like a bad idea, because it seems like you would want a place for people to come in, kind of at their leisure. But, I'm open to people having these discussions, and whenever and to the extent that there are job losses by putting some of the Social Security Administration stuff into the Postal Service, you need to make sure that the people who are in the Social Security Administration have a guaranteed job in the new Postal Service departments or whatever. You want to make sure that people are taken care of and that the service is actually good. But, tentatively, this sounds like a really genuinely a good and interesting idea that we'll have to obviously see what the devil's in the details. But both the NALC and the APWU have issued tentative support for the idea. The NALC's was less tentative. The APWU was still very nervous about the thing, but pulling the Postal Service into the Commerce Department, ultimately probably not a good idea. You can do what he's proposing even with it being outside of the Commerce Department, I would think. But pulling it into the Commerce Department would be illegal. It would be a violation of the Constitution and a violation of the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970. And so, which is not to say that it would be illegal, like, de facto to pull it into the Commerce Department, but you'd have to get a law, right? Because a law established the Independent Postal Service, so a law would need to end the Independent Postal Service and bring it into commerce or whatever. So, Trump couldn't do that unilaterally, but so anyway, there you go. Broken clock, interesting idea.
Yeah, I wish you would have talked about postal banking.
Yeah, postal bank. Oh, and yes, postal banking. But the reason that the post office doesn't do any of these really cool, innovative ideas like postal banking, like we used to do, is because Congress stops them from doing it. The Postal Service could do so much more and leverage the assets that it has, both to bring in more revenue and to serve the American people. But Congress has stopped it because if you have the Postal Service doing these kinds of things, it becomes a competitor to the private sector. If you allow postal banking, the post office becomes a competitor to the banks. And because the post office does not have to produce the tax that is profit to enrich wealthy people, the Postal Service could do banking better and cheaper. But, and so that's why banks don't want postal banking and why they have been able to lobby Congress to stop it for so long. And so that's why a lot of time, to the extent that the government doesn't work as well as it could, doesn't do as much as it could, it's because of these interests in the private sector stopping it, right? So, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's it. I just think you should have talked about it because it's an idea. APWU, among others, has been pushing this for a long time. I know Bernie Sanders talked about it in his campaigns. It's a really good idea, which is, like you said, why it has not been implemented yet.
Right. All right. So Matt Walsh is a right-wing podcast and radio guy. I do think he is actually also on the radio in some places. I think I've heard him on the radio here in Huntsville.
Yeah, I love how you make me know about these people.
Yeah. I gotta. So Matt Walsh has opinions about the federal government. He doesn't like it, but I just want to illustrate for you how little he knows about it by playing a clip from this segment where he's talking about the federal government and how much he hates it, that illustrates how he literally doesn't know, actually the first thing about working in the federal government. Let's play this clip where he talks about the phrase tour of duty.
Yes, this IRS worker stated that he was shocked to be fired because he actually showed up to work 5 days a week. That was his tour of duty, as he put it. These are people who legitimately think they're storming the beaches of Normandy just by going into an office building on a regular schedule.
Okay, so Matt Walsh there responding to a clip of an IRS employee who was laid off, who happened to mention that he goes into the office, not that he works 5 days a week. All federal employees work 5 days a week, at least if you're full-time. But this IRS employee went into the office 5 days a week, and he said, "That's my tour of duty." And so this triggered Matt Walsh because he thinks that sounds military, and he thinks that means the IRS employee feels like he's valiant, like he's storming the beaches of Normandy because he's using this language, tour of duty. That is just what the government calls your schedule. When I onboarded with the federal government, when I started working for the Corps of Engineers 8 years ago, I was given a tour of duty. When I filled out my time card, that's just what it was called, a tour of duty. And so that is just what the government calls it, right? And so you don't have a problem with this IRS employee. You have a problem with the people who came up with the naming conventions for schedules in the federal government. But he clearly doesn't know that, because he is so triggered by the use of this word. If he had known, I mean, literally that would be, the first thing that you learn about working in the federal government is that your schedule is just called your tour of duty, at least at the Corps of Engineers and apparently at the IRS, right? But he doesn't know that, because these people, they don't need to know anything. They don't need to know anything to do what they're doing. And it's so frustrating seeing these attacks on federal workers and the work that we perform for the American people from folks who don't know the first thing about working for the federal government. So here's some more of his commentary about federal employees.
But for many federal workers, this email is an existential threat. That's because, unlike the overwhelming majority of workers in this country in the private sector, they, in many, though not all cases, don't do anything. And to this point, have not been expected to do anything. They just shuffle papers around and wait until their pensions vest.
It's so stupid. And so here he's talking about the what did you do email and reacting to it and saying, oh, they don't have to do anything. And so now they have to do something at least once a week. They're going to have to send this stupid email. And Sohrab Ahmari, as the right take on this. And it's interesting because Sohrab Ahmari is a conservative writer. He writes for Compact Magazine. I think he's the editor of the magazine. Now, Sohrab Ahmari is a bit interesting because he's a conservative writer, but he's also kind of like pro-social democracy and unions and stuff like that. But he had a tweet where he said Musk's demand for federal employees to explain their achievements is actually the definition of bullshit work, right? In bureaucracies, this is still Ahmari talking, in bureaucracies, the pencil pushers who thrive are actually the ones who are best at crafting bullshit weekly accomplishment narratives. And that's exactly right. Like this demand is coming from, a technocrat guy who thinks he is better than everybody and who genuinely believes that federal workers do not report to their supervisors already. I mean, it is so stupid. So stupid. And so here are a few reasons why why on its face, as a principled matter, this what did you do last week email is really dumb. For one, federal workers obviously already report to their supervisors. Supervisors already know what their workers are doing. Whether you have this formalized structure of reporting or not, a supervisor is going to know if their employee is being productive. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, who the hell is going to read them? The answer is nobody, right? Supposedly, they received 1 million emails from the last What Did You Do Last Week email. 1 million! 1 million. That is one with 6 zeros behind it. 1 million emails. Who is going to read that? There are only 30 employees at Doji. They don't have time to read. They do not have time to read 1 million emails. And so the next answer is AI, which is also stupid. We should not have robots in charge of supervising federal workers. That does not make any amount of sense. Secondly, this also costs money for no benefit, right? I just explained there's not going to be any benefit to this because there's no way to actually evaluate what people are saying. And it also costs money, right? People have done the math on this and they've said that, look, if every federal employee replied and every federal employee only took 15 minutes to reply, that would cost at least $12 million a week. $12 million a week for exactly like Sohrab Ahmari says, bullshit work, right? I mean, what? I want a VA nurse to take time, and then it also, in addition to it costs money, it takes time away from being productive, right? So you're telling me that you want a VA nurse to step out of the room where she's caring for somebody and craft up this stupid ass email to send into the ether that nobody is going to read. It's stupid. It's stupid, right? Waste time that people could be being productive. And finally, what this will actually be used for is, one, for the data benefit of like AI that Elon Musk wants to create. He's probably going to use a lot of this data in the background of his like AI software. So it's going to be something that's going to personally enrich him. And also it could be used against a worker later for political targeting, right? So what if Elon Musk sees a federal worker on CNN that he doesn't like? Well, then maybe Elon Musk can go into this and type in their name into the search bar at OPM and find the emails that they sent that had not been previously evaluated and see if he likes their answer, or see if maybe one week they didn't do it, or see if, and then blast that in front of everybody and try to get this worker fired, not because of actual poor performance, because that's what a supervisor would do, but to target people politically, right? And so that's actually a real concern here. So very stupid. It's a stupid just on its merits, and we can talk about the legality of it later, but on its merits, it is a dumb guy thing. It's a dumb guy thing to believe is smart, right? If you think this is a smart idea to have 2 million federal workers send an email to Elon Musk and his 30 Doji employees, that is stupid. That is a dumb idea. And it's not going to be beneficial. It's going to waste time. It's going to cost the government money, and it is not going to benefit anybody. Okay. So here, Walsh has some thoughts on the lawsuit.
They're specifically objecting to Elon Musk's statement that if workers don't answer the email, it'll be taken as a resignation. They're arguing, in essence, that federal workers are entitled to ignore emails from their bosses asking them what they do all day.
Can you play that one more time? I'm sorry.
They're specifically objecting to Elon Musk's statement that if workers don't answer the email, it'll be taken as a resignation. They're arguing, in essence, that federal workers are entitled to ignore emails from their bosses asking them what they do all day.
Yeah, so here's a reality check for Matt Walsh. Elon Musk is not the boss of federal employees. Doge is not the boss of federal employees. OPM is not the boss of federal employees. Federal employees' supervisors are the boss of federal employees. Okay? The agency secretaries. Trump is, to a certain extent, the boss of federal employees, but not Elon Musk. And so courts have already ruled on that OPM does not have authority to direct employees to do anything. Now, agencies can direct employees to do things, and agencies can direct people to do something like this. But again, on the merits of it, it's not a smart idea. It doesn't make any sense. It's going to waste money, waste time, et cetera, and potentially be used to politically target people, potentially be used to personally enrich Elon Musk. Here, Matt Walsh reacts to a federal worker that was on CNN last week talking about the email.
First, just tell us about this email and what it was like receiving it and what you all have talked about after getting it.
Sure. I got this email Saturday afternoon, about 3 p.m., and I felt absolutely infuriated getting this email with a demand within 48 hours to provide a response on what I did within the last week or face termination. This is clearly an attempt from Elon Musk to harass and bully and intimidate the federal workforce, which is part of his broader plan to gut the federal workforce and privatize public sector services to ensure that corporations like his own can get more profit. And that makes me really angry, and my coworkers as well.
These spoiled brats. I mean, it's amazing. They just can't help themselves. Yeah, the plan is to gut the federal workforce. And you are why, lady. You're the reason why we want to gut the federal workforce, is exactly because of you and people like you. Infuriated that she's being asked to simply, what did you do last week? With the taxpayer money, we are paying you. It's our money out of our pockets to do a job. What did you do the job? What is the job? What did you do? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so stupid. It's just so silly. The federal workers, again, they have to report to their supervisors. There are already ways that supervisors measure employee performance. This is superlative and does not add anything to the government, to the efficiency of the government. And the idea that people are being, it's very frustrating to see people being precious with this email. Because if you read the email, and if you know anything about Elon Musk and about his attitude towards federal employees, it is not just a simple performance evaluation, anything like that. It is an attack on federal workers because the underlying sentiment is that federal workers do not work. That is the whole thing, and it is absolutely meant to bully and harass and intimidate people because these emails are not going to be read. Nobody is going to read these freaking emails. And so if nobody is going to read these stupid emails, then you have to ask yourself the question, what is actually the purpose? And that is the purpose: to bully, harass, and intimidate people, and potentially to enrich Elon Musk with the data, and potentially to politically target people with the data that would be searched for, not evaluated as they come in. So it's very frustrating. I mean, and personally, right? Like, I have experience with something like this. I had my supervisor for a time during the pandemic wanted to have basically something like this. We called it a quantifiable output checklist. And so we filled out this form, and it was exactly this. Like, what did we do last week? And my supervisor only had like 40 employees or something. And even like just evaluating 40 different forms from the people that were under him got to be like just too much work. And so like it was like he had other things to do. He had meetings to be in. And so ultimately that practice was discontinued because it was not beneficial, even just within that small kind of department within the government, because my program manager already knows what I'm doing. We have meetings every single week where we go through our projects and we talk about what's going on, and our program manager would be able to tell if nothing is moving. We have deadlines that we either meet or we don't. And so the idea that even just within this small part of the government that we would have this extra quantifiable output checklist was superfluous, and the very definition of again, bullshit paper pushing work that was ultimately discontinued, and the practice was not continued. And so there's some people kind of also in the chat that are, kind of doing that sort of thing, like just pretending, it only takes 2 minutes. Again, if you actually, I don't think the people that are putting it in the chat that, it only takes 2 minutes actually believe that, because if you take it seriously that this is something that could result in your resignation or termination or discipline, most people are going to put more than 2 minutes of thought into something like that. Okay, that is just the truth. That is just the truth. And it warrants more than 2 minutes of thought. If this is something that can be used against me in disciplinary hearings, potentially for my termination, then yes, that deserves more than 2 minutes of thought. And you're being silly. And frankly, honestly, I almost think that you're lying if you actually believe something like that. Saying just list 5 things quickly. It's not that hard. What did you do? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just, it's being silly. It's not being serious. So,
And again, like, this is your supervisor's responsibility to check on what you've done this week. It shouldn't be Elon Musk or, anyone else, right?
Right.
Everyone who works for the federal government has a supervisor already.
Mm-hmm.
It's asinine.
Yeah, it's asinine. It's silly. Gonna go a few minutes over because I wanted to make sure that we get to this. As an educational thing, because I think this is really important. Trump's assault on services. We talked about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and how it's been effectively shut down. Russ Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, put out on Twitter a tweet about how they are pulling down one of their lawsuits against a predatory lender. And here's what he said, quote, "Over the last 4 years, many working class Americans with limited means faced unexpected medical bills, auto repairs, and higher grocery bills. One company set up an innovative solution by creating a platform to allow borrowers and lenders to connect for loans at no interest, with borrowers able to tip the lender and also donate to keep the platform going. Shockingly, the CFPB tried to destroy this company. Solo, which incurred millions in legal fees and had to lay off 30% of its workforce, it was wrong, and we dismissed the case. More to come, but the weaponization of, quote, consumer protection must end." Now, that sounds interesting. They're just giving money to people at no interest. And the mean Consumer Financial Protection Bureau wanted to shut them down because they were giving money to people for free. That sounds pretty bad. Sounds like the government shouldn't be doing that. That's interesting that the government was doing that. Well, even on Elon Musk's Twitter, readers did not allow that to stand because it's such a lie. And so here's on the community notes on Twitter, on Elon's Twitter, they said, readers added context they thought people might want to know. Solo advertised zero-interest loans, but almost all of Solo's loans carry an equivalent annual percentage rate of over 36% APR, and many loans carry an APR in excess of 300%, with some over 1,000%. So, Oh, that's interesting. So you're telling me that this company wasn't actually just giving money to people for free. It was actually exploiting people and charging usurious interest rates. That's interesting. And in addition to that, like just the fact that they were exploiting people and, extorting and using usurious interest rates and things like this, they also hid behind this woke BS to try to kind of cloak themselves in a positive framework, right? And so Jacobin has an article titled that I really recommend folks read, "Meet Trump's Favorite Woke Payday Lender" by Branko Marcetic. And so they explain in this Jacobin article that, not only they talk about how just the facts of the matter are that they charged, kind of usurious interest rates, but also, here's from the article, Solo is meant to be a techified cross between a payday and micro lender, connecting people who have spare cash they can lend out with other people who need to borrow modest amounts at short notice. In practice, the firm is accused of being a predatory lender that has had legal action taken against it in at least 5 states and was in the process of being sued by the CFPB. And they talk about, how they were extorting people, blah, 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 blah. We already talked about that. Here's the real kicker. Solo did all this while presenting itself outwardly as a, quote, woke company that users could trust because of its diversity and commitment to social justice-y sounding concepts. Solo never tires of telling people that it is the largest black-owned fintech firm and the only black-owned B Corp fintech in the US and Canada. They also never tire of stressing the diversity of its members. Its top brass and company messaging constantly harp on on about how their product is, quote, equitable, complaining that regulators who smacked Solo down weren't driven by, quote, empowering equitable solutions. Its co-founder and president, Rodney Williams, has slammed tech startups that lean on performative rhetoric and has put profits above purpose, and charged that Solo is trying to right the wrongs in systems that have kept underserved communities at bay in a country that is at crisis economically, racially, and environmentally. Even the right-wing media that is all in on Vought's supposed purge of wokeness and DEI regurgitates some of this same rhetoric in presenting Solo in a sympathetic light. And so, really interesting here that Solo is like this kind of wokey company that was exploiting people, but because they were a bank, the Trump administration was like, oh yeah, we like those. Those are the good wokes. The good wokes. As long as they exploit people and basically steal money from poor folks, the Trump administration will support you. So there you go. Seems bad. Seems bad to me. Let's see. We got another couple of things here that I wanted to mention. Let's wrap up with this. This will be the last one. Sean Fain was at a Democratic event where he was talking about, what the Democratic Party needs to do to bring working class people into the fold. And he had some very, very strong words that I really hope folks in the Democratic Party take to heart. Let's listen to this from Sean Fain.
In this party that can't decide who the fuck they want to represent.
So if you, the recording didn't start until he was already midway through his statement there, but what he said was, the reason Trump is in office today is because we have some people in this party, the Democratic Party, who can't decide who the fuck they represent. And that is true, right? If the Democratic Party, if Kamala Harris had been very obviously on the side of working people more consistently, more materially, and had not been going around doing so much of this, the press tour with Liz Cheney and all of that kind of stuff, she would probably be in office today. And we can look down south to Claudia Sheinbaum for evidence of that. I mean, Claudia Sheinbaum now has an 80% approval rating in Mexico, after having been a part of the AMLO administration, which significantly improved the lives of working class Mexicans, and having attaching herself to that legacy. And there's just no such strong Biden legacy or Democratic legacy right now, right? I mean, the last time there was a huge reorganization of, class power in this country was under Ronald Reagan, and it was for, and basically everything else has been more or less a continuation of the Ronald Reagan administration. And so before that, you did have FDR, who really improved the lives of working people, and FDR won huge landslide majorities all across the country. And the reason that we keep flip-flopping from Democrat to Republican in the United States is because neither party is materially addressing the concerns of working people. Neither party is significantly improving the lives of working class people in this country. And until we have something like that, where one of the parties genuinely, significantly improves the lives of working class people, gives working class people more power, protects working class people from the exploiting class, from people like Elon Musk, we're going to continue to flip-flop back and forth with razor-thin majorities, like Trump won with in 2024, like Biden won with in 2020, and like Trump won with in 2016. We're going to continue to keep flip-flopping with razor-thin majorities, and sometimes not even majorities, sometimes only pluralities, until one of the parties does something real for working people. And that's what it's going to take. And so hopefully Democrats hear that and they take it to heart and they decide to actually do something real and significant to benefit working class people if they get power again. So that's going to be it for us this week, folks. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Adam, do you have anything else before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Appreciate your engagement. Don't forget to leave us a voicemail throughout the week, 844-899-TVLR. We'd love to hear from you. Give us feedback. Let us know what's going on in your local, any, worker struggles happening in your community. We'd love to hear about them. And just want to encourage people to stay involved and do your best in these trying times to build relationships with coworkers and with neighbors and community members, build coalitions, talk to folks who are a little different from you that you might can work together, find those shared interests, because we need a lot of people power these days. The wealthy, powerful interests are really coming for us in a lot of different directions. Regardless of your identity, if you are a regular old working person, which the vast majority of us are, we're getting screwed in a lot of ways. And it's going to take us coming together, uniting across racial and gender and religious lines, and really working together to build a better country and a better world for all of us. It's what we deserve. It's what our future generations deserve. And I believe we can do it. So I just want to give people that encouragement to keep on fighting the good fight. Get involved in your local union. If you do not have a union, now is the time to organize. Regardless of whether you have a union or not, there are community organizations you should get plugged into to try to build a united front against oligarchy.
Yep. All right, folks, appreciate everybody tuning in. That's going to be it for us this week. We'll see you next week. All power to the workers.